Okay, good evening, everybody. I will call to order the Marin Water Board meeting of September 3, 2024. Terry, if we could have roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Director Larry Russell.
The sound in the
Here.
echoey.
Okay, can you hold on, please? Director Larry Russell,
Here.
Director Monty Schmidt,
Here.
Director Jed Smith,
Here.
Vice President Matt Sampson,
Here.
and President Ranjiv Kush.
Here.
And if you could just hold for a minute so that I can make sure our other audience members can pick up the sound properly. Thank you. Does that work? All right, thank you. Okay. Okay, we may proceed. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Terry. Do we have any public comments on the agenda specifically?
Not on the agenda.
Okay, and if just checking on any board member questions regarding the agenda. If not, I'll ask for a motion to adopt today's agenda.
So moved. Second.
Terry, could we have roll call vote, please?
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Sampson,
Aye.
and President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Our next item will be directors and general manager announcements. I'd like to include any external meetings, but then follow up with board committee reports in the next agenda item. And I know we have a few of those. So let's see, Larry, do you want to start on any general announcements or external meetings?
Sure. I attended the International Water Association meeting in Toronto in middle of August,
Great.
and there's a report for the DOC meeting too when we get to it.
Thank you, Larry. Jed?
All good.
Monty?
Nothing to report.
Matt?
Yep. I did attend the Tomales Bay meeting. And the specifics in the meeting were eelgrass reporting back on, and then again on water quality and of interest. I think we should be able to leverage some of that data as we move forward with some of our water projects later on. I'm out in West Marin, so it's really good to continue to stay engaged with that group. I also want to highlight the article that came out in the IJ about the rare bee species that was found. A really good story, really good work being done by all. So thank you for highlighting that for everyone to be able to do. Ben, I did have one question on your report about the water use. Looks like we have some increase in recycled water, and that demand is continuing to increase, and be good at some point just to figure out where that extra demand is going, see how it's being used would be helpful. And that's it.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Ben, in your report, I noted that there was an item that was not highlighted. So I'm going to highlight it, which is the addressing the what do you call it? Demolition of our pump station in Fairfax. So not everyone may be aware, but I think in July, there was an accident on one of the roads in Fairfax, and a truck, I believe a PG&E truck, actually fell off the embankment and onto a Marin water pump station, which disabled our ability to provide water to a substantial number of residents in that neighborhood. And there was a fairly brief period during which they did not have water because staff was able to rig a generator, a diesel powered generator up, and continue to move water up to the storage tank. It might be Manor storage tank. I'm not sure, but move it up so that we could continue to service households in the affected area. But as everyone can imagine, the diesel powered generator and the pump don't really give us the best environmental quality. So staff continued to work on that issue. The first step was to enclose the pump in a specialized container unit that staff purchased and modified for this purpose. And then staff, I think, did something very creative in identifying an option for bringing electricity to the site together in collaboration with PG&E. And this was not easy because it required identifying ways to bring phase one energy, electricity to support a pump that requires phase three electricity. And I believe that is now operational. So the pump is now running on electric power. So very, very, I thought that was really inspiring response. Just one other quick item I noted in the watershed, in the report on infractions and incidents, that littering was highlighted, particularly next to Cataract Trail. And I've been walking some of the trails, as I'm sure many people have as we prepare for this discussion. And I've noted a lot of dog waste in bags particularly. And I'm not sure what people are thinking when they leave the bags. Sean, I know it's not an item for this meeting in any way, but maybe this is something we can come back to at some point, because it's quite noticeable. And with that, I'll move then to our next agenda item, which is board committee reports.
I do.
Yeah, sorry, Ben.
I do have a brief item tonight.
Oh, sorry,
Correction,
sorry.
Trish, if I could.
I thought I was going to take over the general manager's report too.
So I was going to speak to the dog waste issue, but I've seen it, they collect it, think they're going to pick it up and forget when they come back. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah. So I wanted to provide a brief update on the Nicasio Spillway project as staff begins to work on this really important project, as you know, to obtain 3,000 acre feet of additional storage with really a fairly minor raise of the spillway. We've realized that many of the regulatory complexities we were dealing with the Phoenix Bontempi project were similar to the Nicasio project. So given that, our plan is to prioritize the Nicasio project and learn from that. But given the much better water supply we bring the community, 3,000 acre feet with the Nicasio project, while we continue with the Phoenix project with a bit of a lesser priority focus for now. We do have an aggressive timeline on the Nicasio project. It's already in design with construction currently planned to commence in 2025. And the cost of this project is by far the lowest water supply project available to us, comparable, maybe even a bit less than what we currently pay, perhaps an order of magnitude less than some of the large projects. So it's very attractive and we're moving aggressively. And of course, in parallel, we continue our work with the longer term conveyance and storage projects, and we'll continue to update the board with that. Wanted to provide that update.
Thank you, Ben. That's an important update. So well appreciated. And now I will move to board committee reports. I believe we had 3 last month, beginning with the operations committee and special board meeting on August 16th. Larry, any comments or thoughts from the last operations?
Yeah, I didn't recognize it by that name when you called it out that way, but for the operations committee report from Friday, August 16, 2024, staff provided an update on the Fairfax Manor First Pump Station reconstruction project, which is the one you just mentioned. They didn't bring a generator. They brought a diesel-driven pump that they borrowed from Contra Costa Water, as I understand it. And so they actually had somebody had to be there to run the pump. The plan is to rebuild the new permanent pump station in a timely manner. The board approved a professional service agreement with Carollo Engineers for design services of this project at the meeting. So it's a little unusual. We had a quorum there and went ahead and were asked to approve this to move things forward. Staff also presented 2 professional services agreements for as-needed geotechnical engineering and field and laboratory materials testing with Miller Pacific Engineering Group and RGH Consultant. This item was referred to tonight's regular meeting for the board to consider approving the agreements. To be noted here is that the staff has recommended going with 2 consultants because of the amount of work that sometimes occurs and the inability of one of them perhaps to respond. Previously, we had just had a contract with one geotechnical firm. Staff also provided an update on the water supply roadmap, proposed storage projects, which Paul Celia did an excellent job of presenting. And the public may access the staff reports and a video recording of the August 16th UPS meeting on Marin Water website. That's what I got.
Thank you, Larry. Jed, the next one is the Communications and Water Efficiency Committee meeting. I believe that was specifically a committee meeting in which you chaired.
Yes, we did not have a quorum for a board meeting, so it was not a special board meeting, but it was a committee meeting. On August 21st, Wednesday, the staff provided an annual review of the district's water efficiency programs and continued initiatives promoting conservation. We also provided a communications and analytics report and an update on recent outreach activities that support a number of different district initiatives and programs, and you can reach and view this on a recording at on the district's website. I want to just add some color to it. I thought that Carrie did an outstanding job in following up on some of the deliverables from the master plan, and I'm super proud of the efforts. And then once again, we got another award for our terrific efforts. Adrienne Mertens is a superstar, and I thought her analytical approach to success is great. So we're lucky to have these 2 superstars in our organization. I can move on to the finance and administration, if that's all right, Ranjit?
Yeah, please.
This was a special board meeting, and so we on Thursday, August 22nd, I chaired the Finance and Administration Committee special board meeting, and the staff provided internal employees culture initiative and shared the results of a recent employee engagement survey. The culture initiative, I just want to thank again Ben and team for just an outstanding effort to reach out to broad numbers of represented folks in the organization as well as management to help think through how we can better support our folks to be productive and in many ways. You could see by the smiles in everybody's face around that room that we're off to a great start, and I commend the team for doing that. We also had our consultants at Bartle Wells Associates provide an update on the district's capacity charge, which provides the district with connection fees. And the staff also discussed in the committee proposed changes to the board policy number 50 regarding the board ethics policy, sections 1 and 2 of the board handbook. And I thought Molly did an outstanding job. This was more cleanup than anything, and maybe a little bit of continued education for the board. Now, the public may access the video recording and documents from the August 22nd FAC meeting on the district's website.
Great. Thanks, Jed. Thanks for both of those. We'll move on then to our consent calendar. No, we need public comments on board committee reports. Do we have any public comments?
We need public comments on items not on the agenda. And
Should have done that earlier. Do we have public comments on items that are not on the agenda?
yes, I have myself on behalf of the Rowan family, if they're not here, and 1402. So let's start off with 1402. Go ahead, 1402. I've unmuted you.
James Holmes Larkspur, I have a question as to whether the following statement, which was contained in a Larkspur staff memorandum, and it purports to summarize or paraphrase what is in the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. The statement, which is surprising to me, is, quote, "The district expects the available supplies to be sufficient to meet projected demands in all hydrologic conditions," in quote, and continuing, "including a 5-year drought period and considering the impacts of climate change. End quote. So my question again is this accurate? Is it the district's position that it has available water supplies sufficient to meet projected demands in all hydrologic conditions, including a 5-year drought period? I don't think it does because it's involved in so many planning projects for long-term supply expansion, and also it nearly ran out of water a couple of years ago. But I wonder if that statement that I quoted you is an accurate position regarding the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan. If it's not, I'd sure like to know and be able to caution the Larkspur staff to check in with the district staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Carol,
Terry, I'll just ask if we can follow up on that question directly with the.
Yeah, I would, thank you for that. I'd suggest our water supply management plan is on our website. It does speak for itself. I don't know the exact quote that it's necessarily captured accurately, but I'd say generally, it did conclude that with the RENA numbers and the approach the district's taking for our water supply initiatives, that the housing numbers shouldn't be constrained based on water supply generally.
thank you. Miss Carol Dulcini, please.
Oh, thank you. Good evening. My comments regard the proposal currently being explored to expand MMWD's Sulihule Reservoir. I am a member of a West Marin community whose homes and businesses currently border on the Sulihule. However, these homes and businesses will fall well within the inundation area should the expansion go through. The proposed inundation area threatens to remove from production thousands of acres of farmland of local importance, which will directly impact Marin's economy. For these and many other reasons, my neighbors and I have been urging the board and staff for the past 2 years to move away from the option of expanding Sulihule, to keep the dam at its current height, and to keep Sulihule Reservoir at its current volume. Work instead toward making Sulihule's 10,000 acre-feet more useful to Marin water customers by electrifying the pumps that are necessary to connect Sulihule's water to the rest of the Marin water system. Finally, as you prepare to present and justify the one preferred alternative for increased storage, I request that the staff include the cost per acre-foot based on yield. This is a question which has been asked repeatedly over the last 2 years of this process and yet has not been answered. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And then I'm going to time myself. This is from the Rowan family, a 4th grader, and it says, there's a letter in the back here. It says, "Dear Marin Water Board, thank you so much for taking care of Mount Tam and keeping it safe. Thank you for listening to what everyone thinks about the trails because the mountain is really important to me. I like taking care of the mountain too and doing trail work. I ride my bike on Mount Tam every week. It's my favorite place. I want to become pro biker and I'm excited to ride on new trails so that I can be a better mountain biker." So that was him.
Thank you to Rowan if he's still listening.
Oh, I do have one more speaker, Nona Dennis. Go ahead, Miss Dennis. I've unmuted you.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I just arrived, just sat down. Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of Marine Conservation League. In 2018, the Water Board promised a holistic approach to managing the growing demand for recreation on the watershed by all visitors, while fulfilling its primary missions. To that end, district staff and board have committed thousands of hours and consultant funds in an effort to fulfill that promise, and we've engaged in community conversations. We have a huge amount of useful data. We've agreed on a lot of things. It's unfortunate that at this step, involving.
Sorry,
first step involving.
no, I don't know if you can hear me, but we're not yet on to the, I think the specific agenda item that you're addressing.
Oh, I'm sorry. What are you addressing? I just sat down to.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you haven't gotten to the rec plan yet. The
That's
recreation
right.
plan. Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Okay, I
So,
wait.
so Terry, we'll cut 1 minute off of Nona's allocation.
Wait a
Just kidding.
minute, guys.
All right.
Okay.
All right, I have no further speakers for public comment not on the agenda.
But I gotta say, I'm glad that I'm not the only one that gets things out of order. Now, hopefully I am in order when I say the next item is our consent calendar. And today that includes 6 items. I'm going to read them out quickly. The first is approval of the minutes from our last board meeting on August 6th. The second is our general manager's report for July 2024. The third is a resolution authorizing award of contract number 2010 under our fire flow improvement program for the Rock Ridge Pipeline Replacement Project to WR Ford Associates in the amount of $2,843,105. Number 4 is approval of amendment number 1 to Watershed Roads and Trails contract number 1981 with Piazza Construction. Number 5 is to adopt a resolution amending the conflict of interest code of the Marin Municipal Water District. These look like only administrative issues, Molly, I think, on the conflict of interest. And then number 6 is authorization for our general manager to execute 2 professional services agreements with Miller Pacific Engineering Group and RGH Consultants for on-call as-needed geotechnical engineering and field and laboratory testing services, with each contract in the amount not to exceed $500,000. Terry, do any public comments on these items from our consent calendar?
Not on the consent calendar.
Then do we have a motion to approve our consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice President Sampson,
Yes.
and President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, then moving on to our regular agenda, we'll start with item 9A, which is the Hyde Tanks Replacement Project, Land Exchange and Project Approval. Welcome, Alex and Alicia.
Good evening, directors. Alex Nye, Engineering Director. This afternoon, we're presenting the Hyde Tank Replacement Project. With me this afternoon is Alicia Irish, our Engineering Manager of Planning, who will be presenting this item to you.
Good evening, directors. Tonight we'll be talking about Hyde tanks. Hyde tanks are 2 of our storage tanks in our system, and they are 2 of the 4 remaining Redwood tanks in our system. These tanks are 100,000 gallons and 200,000 gallons, and they were installed in 1978 and 1958, respectively. These tanks have been identified for a replacement since we initiated the Redwood Tank Replacement Program in the early 2000s. These tanks have not yet been replaced due to property issues in regards to the relocation of the tanks from their current location. Recently, the district was successful in negotiating a land exchange agreement with the surrounding property owner that would allow the district to relocate the tanks to a different location within the property owner's parcel adjacent to the existing tank site, subject to due diligence review of the new site, which began in March of 2024. Since that time, staff has performed due diligence in environmental, geotechnical, and land surveying areas. These investigations all show that the proposed site is constructible for these new tanks. Staff recommends that the board authorize the board president to execute an amendment to the land exchange agreement to correct the property easement legal description and extend the due diligence period. Staff also recommends that the board authorize the district general manager to complete the due diligence review and proceed with the proposed land exchange, barring any legal challenge to the project under the California Environmental Quality Act. Staff further recommends that the board approve of the Hyde Tank Replacement Project and direct staff to file the notice of exemption within the Marin County Recorder's Office.
Thank you, Alicia. I know that we've been discussing this for a while, so it is really great, at least from my perspective, to see it moving forward. It seems like a kind of a win-win, actually, for us and the property owner. But let's open it up for board comments. Monty, anything?
Nothing from me.
Got it. Matt? Larry, any comments?
No.
And is Jed there?
Yep, all good. Thank you.
Okay. And we'll open it up for public comments now.
There are none on this item.
Okay, then we can move quickly. I'll read out the action that's required. We have actually three components. One is authorization for the board president to execute an amendment to the land exchange agreement for the Hind Tanks replacement project and authorize the general manager to proceed with the land exchange for the new tank site, barring any legal challenge to the project under the California Environmental Quality Act. The second item is approval of the Hind Tanks replacement project. And the third is to direct staff to file a notice of exemption. I think we can cover all three of these under a single motion.
So moved.
Second.
Terry, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Director Sampson, oh, I'm sorry. Let me start off properly. Director Russell, I apologize.
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Yes.
Vice President Sampson,
Aye.
and President Kush.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. On with the agenda. The next item is our watershed trail sharing pilot program and e-bike class 1 trial. Welcome, Sean and Don. And Carl. And Sherry.
Good evening, board members. I'm Sean Horn, Director of Watershed Resources, and I'm joined today with Carl Sanders, our Natural Resource Program Manager, Sherry Adams, our Senior Ecologist and Botanist, and Don Wick, our Chief Ranger on the watershed. So the item that we have for you tonight is our Watershed Recreation Management Planning process and update, and our e-bike trial and e-bike and trail sharing pilot. So the action item and recommendation from staff tonight is to adopt pursuant to an exemption of the California Environmental Quality Act, ordinance number 465, updating the district code to allow a trail pilot program to be adopted by the board of directors through a resolution, and approval resolution for a notice of exemption for an e-bike trial and a bike sharing pilot program. So with that, we're going to go through a presentation that we've prepared to you for you this evening that goes through the background of this planning process to give us an update on how we've gotten here, to talk about the e-bike trial that we're proposing and recommending that the board approve, talk about the trail sharing pilot, and review the trail assessment that the district conducted to inform this process, and then next steps to move it forward. So I want to pause for a moment on this slide. This started in 2018, the process of having a community workshop to discuss e-bike access on the watershed. And I think this can seem like a very long, drawn out process for most, about 5 years or so. But I think it really speaks to just the complexity of bike issues in California and in Marin County, and how we manage our roads and trails for multi-purpose access, and how we think about access planning here in Marin. So the district started this process to talk with the community through an e-bike CAC that the board of directors directed staff to form to review various issues relating to e-bike access on the watershed. We held 7 public workshops beginning in September of 2019 through April of 2020 to review these issues with the community in a public forum. We developed a report that summarized the findings of this process and made recommendations to the board of directors. And through that, we came up with a final recommendation of reviewing the watershed holistically through a watershed recreation management planning feasibility study to think about all visitors and how they're using and visiting the watershed. So this initiated with the scoping meeting. We had two of them, one in May of 2021 and one in June of 2021, to allow the community to provide early input on the planning process. Since then, we've had 7 workshops and 2 site visits to inform that process. It was informed through a partnership with Oregon State and their watershed, the Recreation Ecology Department and their Professor Ashley D'Antonio, who helped kind of provide an outline for how a public process would look. We had consulting support to organize each of those meetings and develop a final report that informed kind of our next steps. To support that, we also had a watershed visitor survey update. So we last did a watershed survey in 2013. We updated that in 2022 through doing on-site visitor surveys on the watershed to get direct input from visitors. It was a very informative process. We heard a lot of good input from the community out there. Some of the takeaways were most people thought that the roads and trails were in good to great condition. We heard that most people were feeling safe visiting the watershed. They were having good interactions with other visitors. However, they did feel that our restrooms could be improved. There was limited parking and there was opportunities for thinking about trail improvements. So from that, we developed the final recreation feasibility study, which had a series of strategic opportunities that the board approved in January. The last watershed committee meeting in June, we reviewed staff's progress on those strategic outcomes. And tonight we're here to review the pilot program and e-bike access. Now, in support of each of these processes, as kind of these transitional points, we had individual stakeholder meetings to gather additional input because we had heard from folks that they wanted to have one-on-one discussions to provide additional input on the process. And the district has been carrying this out throughout the entire process. And I think what we want to highlight in showing this slide is just the dedication that the district has had to continuing to get community input and think about how we make progress in our access planning on the watershed, and really acknowledging and recognizing that the district as a water district has been really a leader in thinking about public access on its watershed lands. Now, the trail sharing pilot program and e-bike class 1 trial that we're here discussing tonight are really providing an opportunity for the district to evaluate class 1 access in areas where bikes are allowed. We're going to do this for a limited period of time to gather information to inform a further CEQA review, and then also a pilot program for multi-use trail access and bike access on trails, on a subset of watershed trails. So we've evaluated trail sharing methods through our trail assessment, and we're going to present those to you tonight. And again, this would be allowing the district to gather additional information to inform a longer-term CEQA process as part of our updated roads and trails plan that we'll speak to later. The e-bike class 1 trial is the first one we're going to speak to tonight. We're really looking to evaluate the inclusion of class 1 e-bikes on the watershed and the experience that folks are having with those and the total number of bikes. So thinking about e-bike class 1 as the state currently does, which sees it as a bicycle, and considering how the inclusion of it influences bike use on the watershed as a total. So we'll talk to the data collection process that we'll be carrying out over this period of time. We're going to install key trail counters at key locations to gather information about the trend of bike access on the watershed with the inclusion of e-bike class 1s. Now, we did collect some of this data as part of our visitor census survey. We had trail counters at key locations. We'd be bolstering that collection, and we'd be starting from the beginning of October if this is approved, and actually tracking the trend of bike use on the watershed over that period. We'd also be conducting 2 rounds of visitor surveys to understand perceptions, experiences, and conflicts around trail use with e-bike access included on the watershed. Now, the trail sharing pilot is to examine new approaches to sharing trails and improve trail experiences for all visitors. We're really looking at how we can develop new processes for supporting multi-use access on current trails. And the trail sharing pilot is focused on existing trails. So these aren't new trails that the district would be developing. They're existing trails with existing use. We'd be doing a data collection process, looking at quantitative and qualitative data relating to environmental conditions. We conduct visitor surveys to evaluate visitor experience, conduct trail counts to collect visitor use data, monitor compliance with the trail program regulations through enhanced enforcement and patrol activities on the watershed. And we'd monitor use of social trails and off-trail usage in the vicinity of the pilot program trails themselves. We'd also evaluate the efficacy of enhanced community-based trail stewardship opportunities. So if we increase the frequency, do we see the ongoing numbers of volunteers that we want to see to support this program as a whole? Now, to inform the pilot program for multi-use trails, we conducted a trail assessment on a subset of trails. So we heard from the community when we were talking about this concept of a pilot program for trails that we needed to look at how to avoid sensitive resources. So we did an assessment of each of these trails to look at where we had sensitive plant communities. We wanted to look at where we had stream crossings and had those been improved, or were there additional improvements that could be made, and then identified stewardship opportunities throughout this, each of the trails that we were evaluating. That would kind of be a list of volunteer events that we could host to support the improvement of those various trails. Now, I will just say, like, all of the volunteer improvements that we could be doing are activities that we could currently conduct under our roads and trails plan as part of our maintenance activities, and are also supported by the documents tonight. Now, with regard to safety, this is kind of a core and critical component of our evaluation. So I'm going to hand it to Don Wick to kind of walk us through how rangers were looking at each of these trails as we assess them from a safety perspective.
Good evening. I'm Don Wick, Chief Ranger. So the Rangers have been involved in this process from the get-go. Our goal is safety for all the visitors. So we have that, that's our stake in this more than anything else. So we're looking at what trails are conducive to line of sight, which ones are not too difficult for a trial period. With that, we want to explore putting in clear signage on what's going on with the trails, any dangers, any things that need to be looked out for, slow and say hello, or slow zones, slow and say hello zones, where you're going to have hikers and bikes and equestrians meet each other. Clearly spell out what is expected of the visitors on all parts. And then we're going to, at the onset of this whole thing is to educate the visitors. It's a big change for everybody. Before we start enforcing anything, we want to walk everybody through education first and what is expected. So I think that we're also looking at what trails we can use that hook up with adjacent trails to make a complete route, so that it's conducive for the riders to use, rather than using a portion of it and then hopping off. We want to have a complete route for them to go. And so I think the main thing is we want to educate. It's incumbent on behavior on every visitor's part for this to be successful or not successful. And that's what we're going to be out there doing, is monitoring this to make sure that people understand what's going on, what the rules are, and what's expected of them. And we want to make this a safe and successful pilot plan if you guys approve it.
Thanks, Don. And just to note, we do have speed limits on the watershed of 15 miles an hour. Those would be maintained on all of these pilot program trails. And we'd have slow zones at trail intersections where they're interfacing with downhill routes to try to protect those. So those are areas that we evaluated as we did the assessment for each trail. In addition to that, we went out and did trail counts on the actual trails that we're considering, and looked at the patterns of use. We assessed trail sharing opportunities in terms of what strategies might we be recommending to support multi-use, and then current visitor experiences and how we could protect those experiences through various trail sharing strategies. We also included an assessment of soil erosion risk, water quality, trail and tread width, and geological settings, really looking to avoid those serpentine habitats where we could. The pilot program trail assessment was really guided, as Don was speaking about, of trying to find areas where we could have hiker and biker trails, hiker, biker, and equestrian trails. We did not go as far as looking at biker only trails. This was really about how do we share the existing facilities without impacting others. We weren't proposing new facilities that would be bike only in this proposal. We're really specifically looking at our existing trail system. And we did not look at social trail systems as part of this. We focused on existing trails. The sharing strategies that we heard during the feasibility study were around directional bike access, days of the week proportioning for users groups, and then opportunities where we could find them of road to trail conversions. So that's what we've built into our recommendation this evening. And then the trail experience, we were thinking about strategic connections, trying to get bikes off of vehicle roads, looking for loops, looking for and considering various visitor experiences, and understanding that there's an interest in a range of technical difficulties. So I apologize, this is as small on your screen this evening. You can zoom in if you have the luck of being on Zoom. I'll put on glasses. We went through each of these trails, and we actually started with about 12 miles of trails. We assessed 10 miles, just going through a prioritization process to help us think through each of these trails. We looked at the total length of the trail. We looked at the current level of use that each trail had, and we did that through going out to each trail on a Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday for a 2-hour window over a 2-week period, and actually counting the number of people that we were seeing. So we wanted to get high or low, medium, and high numbers in regards to trail use for our weekday and weekends to inform our process. We looked at trail difficulty, and this is, somewhat conservative. I think some people would think that some of these trails are more difficult and others would think less difficult, but we came up with a rating for that. We looked at connectivity. This is something that we were trying to avoid, was having pilot program trails that fed into system and non-system trails that might be attractive for others to use to reduce potential poaching. We looked at the width of the various trails. We looked at the surface conditions. Most were compact native soils, but we did have some areas that had pavement along them. We looked at where we could avoid serpentine soils, looking at the grade, and then looking at kind of the surface conditions to help us inform what kind of maintenance might be needed. From a safety perspective, we're looking at lines of sight, and we're looking at areas that would need to be improved in order to be opened. And so we've got some priorities there to help inform actions that we would be taking over the next month. We also looked at opportunities for, sorry, hold on. Looked at slow zone opportunities, so where we would put those on various trails, looked for trail hazards that could be mitigated. You could imagine this being a low hanging branch or something that could be pruned back to provide access, or some pruning that would need to be made. Also looking at the trail surface and hazards that we could improve there. From a biological standpoint, we overlaid our rare plant data and took a conservative method there to look at where we'd have points of intersection and how we could avoid those. We looked at water quality by looking at the stream crossings. Had they been improved? Did they need additional work? All of the trails that we're recommending have had improvements on the stream crossings, but there are opportunities to do some additional maintenance of those features to support multi-use. And then we looked at all of these trails, like I mentioned earlier, about stewardship activities that we could build into our volunteer program. And then the trail sharing strategies are the farthest 3 columns in this table, which break down the type of visitor that we're recommending for these trails. It looks at directional opportunities for some of the trails, and then where appropriate, it looks at days of the week proportioning. And I think what we want to highlight in this table is kind of one of the complicated ones that is being considered is Sunnyside. That's where we had the highest level of use on the weekends. We would be recommending that we think about a weekday only approach on that trail. And we'd also be thinking about recommending a directional approach so that folks who are using that trail know what to expect when they're using it in terms of a bike coming one direction. The benefit of Sunnyside is that there's an alternative trail, Shadyside, that folks can use. So if you want to avoid a trail with a bike, there's an opportunity for that. So those are kind of our thinking that went through this entire process in terms of assessing the trails. So with that, the pilot program trails that we looked at, there were about 12 miles in total. We did not assess International and Pilot Knob because they didn't meet some of our goals within the pilot program. We did assess 10 miles, and of those trails, we're recommending about 6 miles. So the orange ones are not trails that we're recommending at this point. And so before we go into the next set of maps to kind of walk you through each of those trails, I'm going to hand it over to Sherry to provide us some context with how rare plants were mapped for this program.
Hi there, Sherry Adams, vegetation ecologist, Marin Water. I'll just give you briefly some background on the plant data that we collated for this project. So our invasive plant data comes from our collaboration with our 1TAM partners, and we've been actually increasing our early detection surveys on these just to make sure we've got a good sense of what the current condition is on invasive plants. Our rare plant data comes from a variety of sources. One thing to be aware of is in order to protect the plants, we don't provide really detailed information on our knowledge of where. We're not going to show you this rare plant's in exactly this location, but in the maps that you'll be seeing here shortly, along with some information in the packet, you can get the general sense of where rare plants are known. None of these are state or federally listed. None of these trails are adjacent to state or federally listed plants. Some of them are adjacent to plants that have a California rare plant ranking. And so Sean will show those in the upcoming maps.
Thanks, Sherry. So the first trail that we wanted to look at with you was Grassy Slope Road. This is an opportunity for a road to trail conversion, which is why it was selected. It's one of the only trails in kind of the Pine Mountain part of the watershed that we're proposing for the trail sharing. And this provides a really unique opportunity for us just to test kind of what passive road to trail conversion looks like. We haven't been maintaining this road as a road for a long time, and it's kind of naturally gone back to being a trail. So it's kind of a low hanging fruit to open for this trail program. And we think that it could adequately support the bidirectional use of multi-use access. So bike access on this from a bidirectional point. The next trail that we had was Sunnyside, and we did briefly mention some of the complexities here. Now, this is interesting trail in that it's a very easy trail for some to use. It's moderate. There's a good line of sight. There's limited plant issues along this trail corridor. There is anglers, so there's fishing along this trail corridor. So one of the things we mapped was social trails and connectivities. So this is one that has a lot of social trails, but those social trails aren't connecting to other system trails, or they're not routes that people use. They're actually just trails down to the water edge where you're fishing. So it doesn't become an issue from that perspective. There is the complexity of horses on this trail. And in the current guidelines around municipal management of municipal reservoirs for recreation, there is a buffer of 200 feet, which this trail currently doesn't meet. And so long-term, we do want to think about providing that 200-foot buffer and potentially restricting horse access on this trail. So this would be a trail that we'd actually be recommending is biker and hiker, and we'd be doing bike by direction only, and considering the weekday only approach as well.
Are you saying in the future we're going to be exploring that, or you're recommending that we approve that now just for bikers and hikers?
I think we're recommending right now that we would go forth with bikers and hikers and restricting equestrian access on it.
Okay.
And Pumpkin Ridge is the next trail that we're going to be reviewing. This is actually an old road that was then built into a multi-use trail, but has only been open to hiking and equestrian in the past. This is one where we would be needing to do some improvements on it, and there is a staircase on the kind of southern section of the trail. There's an opportunity for a reroute, but currently we're just proposing to put regulation signs on that staircase that say you have to walk your bike down those staircases. That's similar to the trail that we have along Lagunitas Lake. You have to do that around the residence. So this is a trail that we think could accommodate bidirectional bike use and equestrian and hikers on this trail. And so that'd be the proposal for Pumpkin Ridge Trail. And
is there a date to launch that trail, or are you going to need to do the upgrades first, or what's the timeline?
Yeah, well, if we can hold the next steps slide, we'll go over kind of our strategy for doing the upgrades before the pilot program starts. So the benefit of Pumpkin Ridge is, and I apologize it doesn't show up clearly on this map, but adjacent to Sky Oaks Road, there is an alternative route. So if somebody wanted to avoid a trail that had bike access, you could use the Alex Foreman Trail. And that's open to hiking and equestrian. It doesn't connect to Madrone, so it might not be the loop that you want to make, but there is that alternative, which is a good option, which supports this as a multi-use approach. So the next trail that we're considering recommending is the Madrone Trail. This is a trail that would be beneficial in limited potential plant impacts associated with it. There's a good basic tread condition and trail that's existing. There are some improvements on the kind of eastern part of the trail. It's some switchbacks that have incised over time, and those could be maintained and would be maintained throughout the period of this process. Long term, that's another area where we might want to consider a reroute if this was to be included as a multi-use trail in the long term. The benefit of this is it does connect Pumpkin Ridge down to Concrete Pipe Road. And so Concrete Pipe Road is the next trail that we'd be recommending for inclusion in the pilot program. The benefit of this, again, is it could be an opportunity for a road to trail conversion. It's currently not open to bicycle access, and it would be an easy trail connection to make. And this would establish a good loop in the lakes area that's kind of moderate difficulty. And we'd be recommending a directional on Madrone Trail, a bidirectional on Concrete, and this would connect to Upper Fish Gulch Trail, which would be a directional recommendation. I guess the one thing to note about these trails is they are in kind of our broom management zone. So there'd be kind of an increased need to manage broom along Concrete Pipe Road. And we feel that that's a great opportunity for our partnerships and collaboration and for volunteer activities as well. So the next one is Mountaintop and Air Force Thruway. This is an interesting one in that it does go through some areas that have the buffer of the rare plant zones or sensitive plant zones. The benefit of Air Force Thruway is most of it is paved, so this wouldn't be a large impact. It's not any more use than it currently sees, and then it would connect to Mountaintop Trail as well. And the benefit is that then this does connect to Arturo down the line. So Arturo would be the next trail that we'd be recommending with some improvements that could be open for multi-use and as a directional trail. And the final one is Lakeview Trail, and this would come off of Middle Peak Fire Road and be a connection along the top of the mountain. And the benefit is that these two trails get folks off of Ridgecrest Boulevard, so it's pulling bikes off of the road, putting them on a trail, and long-term there might be a connection that you can make between the two of them. So the recommendation that we have for trail sharing pilots includes these trails. It's about 6.65 miles. The 3 columns to the right define the visitor management strategies that would go along with this recommendation and supported by the notice of exemption and resolution for the pilot program. These are all trails that from our assessment, we think are reasonable selections for a pilot program. We think 6 miles is conservative for a first approach at bringing bikes onto a trail. And we think that these are creating some of the good opportunities from a connectivity and experience perspective. And there's ways to install those management or trail sharing strategies to protect the other visitors that are using the trail. And we fully appreciate and recognize that the only way this is successful is if we can work with the community to influence the behavior of all of our visitors and doing that in partnership and collaboration. So the trail sharing pilot preparation, we'd be installing regulation signs throughout the watershed on all of these trails that are included in the pilot program. We'd be conducting a significant amount of trail maintenance and vegetation work over the next month. A lot of that vegetation pruning is just minor work along these trails to improve the line of sight and the safety of use of those trails. The maintenance is minor alterations to existing trail tread. So in some conditions like Arturo, there's a rock crossing that can be improved because hikers have been going around the historical rock crossing, and that would be a beneficial improvement that we could do as part of this project. There's an old staircase on Arturo that would benefit from some maintenance. So all the maintenance actions would improve the trail conditions for all the visitor and would be carried out over the month of September with a partnership with the California Conservation Corps North Bay, with the contractor that you approved in the consent calendar tonight that helps us with our roads and trails work, as well as with some of our in-house maintenance staff and our volunteers as well. So in addition to this, we're going to be working on developing messaging relating to the pilot program so that we can put those in our kiosks, help highlight the biodiversity and the way that we're trying to protect that through avoidance of our most sensitive areas, and then develop a new watershed visitor map that shows the pilot trails and has some geolocation capabilities so folks know where they are on the watershed. And we'd be deploying that in all of our kiosk updates as we move forward. So with regard to the trail sharing pilot program monitoring, I'm going to hand it to Carl Sanders, and he's going to walk us through this one.
Good evening, Carl Sanders, a Natural Resources Program Manager. I'll just give you a little more background on some of the data that we're going to collect, both baseline and then ongoing, that we'll be using to help us evaluate the success of our project after 2 years. As Sean mentioned, we've conducted trail counts. So we've got a baseline on each of these trails in terms of who's using them and when. You know, we did that over 2 weeks, 3 times a week, 2 different times a day. So we've got a good baseline. We'll continue that trail count throughout the process of this 2 years. Also mentioned invasive plants. We've got good data on existing known populations or patches of rare and invasive species. We'll continue to monitor and actually up our effort on that to make sure that we're not bringing in new invasives and or invasives getting out of control within areas that we're opening for the pilot. Trail conditions, another baseline part of the process. We collected data on the physical or abiotic conditions of each of these trails, their width, their depth, in terms of what changes may occur over time if we're adding different users to them. With that photo monitoring at specific points along that trail. So we'll have one more bit of data to help us evaluate the impact or not from different users. Compliance has been mentioned. We're going to increase our patrol efforts for focused patrol efforts within areas on the pilot and or adjacent to that pilot to see and ensure that we're getting the compliance for the type of use that we're authorizing and not opening up further than that. Visitor experience, is, again, as Sean mentioned, we're going to conduct at least 2 rounds of additional face-to-face visitor surveys. We'll have specific questions that'll build off of the last 2022 survey that we conducted. So just an interaction, a measure of people's experience on that trail. And then, again, also as mentioned, as we monitored and evaluated each of these trails, we inventoried opportunities for, we're calling them trail stewardship, volunteer days. We're already starting to line out a number of volunteer days in preparation for this pilot program. Most of that is just maintenance, either, clearing line of sight, improving tread conditions just to make it safer and or reduce potential for erosion.
Thank you, Carl. So this entire program's supported by the other body of work that the district does, right? We can't ever think about anything we do without understanding all of the monitoring and inventories that the district does, from red-legged frogs to osprey to owls on the watershed to rare plants, right? All of this monitoring is happening at different frequencies and will continue to happen to help us understand the state of the biodiversity on the watershed. It all rolls up into this great peak health report that was recently published in 2023. This is kind of core to supporting all of our operations, right? We use this to inform our vegetation management, our restoration activities, and our trail planning activities. Now, as part of this pilot program, we're not going to attempt to evaluate the difference between an e-bike and a traditional bike on the roads and the trails. We're also not going to be doing primary research or monitoring the impact that different visitor groups have on wildlife or habitat over one another. I think we have to acknowledge at this point that people are the impact, and the approach that we're taking with this program is to look at multi-use trail sharing on existing trails, existing facilities that we have where there's a current tread and there's a current use. We're not going to be trying to decipher which is more impactful over the period of the pilot program. We're also not going to be developing trail sharing methods for every trail on the watershed by any means. We're looking at a subset of trails for the pilot program and thinking long-term as how does that fit into our update to our roads and trails plan with a focus on visitor experience and thinking about how this can be kind of come of a foundation of our access on the watershed. For next steps, I'm going to hand it to Don Wick for a couple updates.
Sure. There we go. So again, Ranger's role is safety. We have, if these trails are approved, we have the areas that we need to concentrate on and be out there. And again, we're going to educate before we enforce, but we want to educate people. We want to get signage out there to make it clear on what the behavior is expected on everybody's part, including the bicyclists. The one thing that we did as Rangers, I just sent 2 of my Rangers through a law enforcement bike patrol class or course. They're certified. The Rangers unit has several e-bikes as well as some manual bikes. My goal is to get them out on those same trails and help monitor them one-on-one with the users, which I think will be a huge help. And it will help us to be out there, be seen. Being on a bike around people is much easier to talk to them, find out what's going on, and address problems. So again, once you guys are good with this, we can set in motion what our job is, which is to get out there and start educating and enforcing it and making sure this is successful for us also.
So then we're starting to organize our monthly trail stewardship events, and we'll continue that through the whole pilot program period. We're looking at setting up quarterly site visits to pilot program trails. So kind of continuing that process that we showed on that second slide, where there would be an arrow to our pilot programs and our community coming out to those sites to look at on the ground conditions and have conversations about how the trail sharing strategies are working. We'd be then looking at conducting visitor experience surveys every 12 months. So we'd do 2 over the course of the pilot program period. We'd continue to provide our updates at the watershed committees periodically. And then all of this is moving towards an update to our roads and trails management plan. It's allowing us to collect that information and data on how trail sharing might work, on how e-bike class 1 might fit into this landscape and on our trails and roads. And so we're developing an RFP that we hope to put out in the winter to help us progress to that next step. As part of that next step, we fully appreciate and anticipate that we'll have a robust stakeholder engagement process similar to what we've been doing, where we have public workshops, where we have stakeholder meetings, and we continue to engage in an inclusive and a transparent way. And we have found it extremely helpful to have everybody having those conversations at the same time so that we can not always be the ones balancing the conversation, but we can let the stakeholders work together to create that collaborative solution-based approach and not just be critical of the other's impact or non-impact on the watershed's facilities. All of this is going in a direction of helping us improve some of those conditions that we've all identified on the watershed that could be improved in terms of the use of system or non-system trails illegally by bikes. We're trying to set up a system of sanctioned trails that would improve access and take that impact away from the watershed, and also thinking about how we can erase some of those social trails from the watershed long-term through improving all visitors' opportunities and experiences and connecting them with the watershed in a meaningful way. So with that, we'll take any questions you might have, but I'll just reiterate that there are a number of items that we're asking the board to adopt to support these programs. There's the watershed trail sharing pilot screening matrix that outlines the trail sharing methods and the visitors per type per trail. Then there's the proposed ordinance that allows the board to create a pilot program through a resolution. There's the 2 resolutions, one for trail sharing pilot, one for an e-bike class 1 trial, and then the CEQA notice of exemptions that support both of those.
Great. Thank you, everybody. A lot there to consider and discuss. So let's begin. Matt, do you want to kick us off?
Yep. I can. I think, first, the most appropriate thing to do is to thank our folks that have been working on this for over a half a decade now, and our general manager and our council for your leadership in this. And then Sean, for you and your team, this is one of the most comprehensive staff reports I've ever read on a topic that's very convoluted, and the amount of time and energy you've put in to try to make this right on a variety of different aspects really is impressive. And I thank you. Carl, Dawn, and Sherry as well. Quick clarification question, Sherry, for you. Thank you for bringing the plant component forward. Can you differentiate between what a California rare plant rating is and then actually something that's actually protected? And I might be getting the vernacular wrong, so I apologize.
So there are a few plants on the watershed that are state or federally listed. So either the state of California or the U.S. government has designated these as rare, threatened, or endangered. None of those are adjacent to any of the trails in this program. There's a lot more species, like over 40 on the watershed compared to about 3 that are in the category I just mentioned. There's many more species that have a California rare plant ranking. This is a system that initially the California Native Plant Society came up with to recognize that even a plant that's not highly imperiled, it's still something we should be paying attention to, be aware of. There may be quite a bit of it around. In the case of many of the plants on Mount Tam, these are plants that are maybe plentiful on Mount Tam, but it has a really limited range. So think of Mount Tam manzanita. There's lots of it on Mount Tam, but it's not found elsewhere. So that's typical of many of the plants that are on that list. So it doesn't have, there isn't like a role where we're hearing from state regulators on these plants. But they're still recognized as something to pay attention to.
Great. Thank you very much for that clarification. Very helpful too. Sean, clarification question. In terms of system trails right now, single track, anything except for a fire road, what do you think estimated mileage is on our property?
So total system trails about 60 miles.
60 miles?
Yeah.
So we're looking about 10% of the trails for this pilot that we're allowing for additional access should we approve it.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So really, I think it helps me form my perspective on what we're doing. And I think it's important because it's going to help hopefully communicate what we're doing on this in terms of sharing our vision. And I think it's important because this process, I think we could do a little bit better in terms of overall, if we do it again, is to share the vision on where we're going with this. Because I don't think it's completely understood about where we're trying to drive to. And for me, that includes the outcomes of where we're going with this pilot. And I think that There's a concern here that this is a revolution, that we're having this fundamental shift, or some people would say a new paradigm, as we move forward on these aspects. And I don't think so. And that's not where my vision is going. And that's not where I like to see the direction going. I think we're dealing with a different demographic in the district. We are looking at people who recreate in a different way, and it's not wrong to do that. What I think is the purpose of the pilot is there a responsible way where we can include that recreation, that form of recreation, this part bikes, in a way that does not disrupt what we're doing on the watershed, specifically with the health of our environment, the safety of our users, and also the quality of the water that we're drinking. And based on the way you've broken this down, I think we have data points both now and then expected what we're going to capture that will help us understand what the impacts are going to be on that. So I think we're in a very good place on that. You know, it's interesting when we hear the safety argument, because I think we should be leading with safety, and I appreciate it being so high in the matrix where you're used to evaluate trails. But safety is something that we adaptively manage, and that's what we try to do first. And I think this pilot should be doing the same thing. And if we didn't do that, if we just shut down everything that quote unquote was not safe as a relative term, folks would no longer hike at Cataract Trails. There'd be a lot of really interesting experiences that people do all day long in the mountain that we would have to yank back if we drove with a really strict safety component all the time. And what I mean by that is not accepting safety or a safety issue as okay, but looking for ways to address it. And I think this pilot also does that, where we're talking about directional, we're talking about weekday, weekend use, some various potential small workarounds to make it safer. So I appreciate all of that as well. But I do like, so one, I want to thank you for including those quarterly updates for out there looking at the trails. I think it's very, very important to get the folks that stakeholders that speak as voices for the different user groups to all come out together so they can all hear what you're saying, all hear, Dawn, what you and your staff are saying, Sherry, what you guys are seeing, Carl, what you guys are seeing as impacts, and let them put their eyes on the trails and see how it's going, and also provide a forum from which they can provide user experiences from their selective groups or them personally, however they do it. So having that component for me is critical. So thank you very much for adding in. But as it sits right now with the recommendations, I feel like we have a lot of good positive momentum, and I think this is a very conservative first step. That again is not leading to a revolution. This is not, Mount Tam is not going to become a bike park. That's not the way I see this. We are not looking to put a chairlift to going to the top of the mountain. These things are all, I hope no one's actually thinking that way, because in my opinion, this is a responsible look at ways we can include a new popular demographic in a way that makes sense, that we can control, that we can understand where they go, and that we can understand what the impacts are so we can either change or make it better. And along those same lines, you know, we look at evaluation of these trails. I don't think it should be lost that part of that evaluation should include frequency based on baseline from today moving forward to night riding or illegal trail building or poaching. These are all the attitudes that I think people are very much concerned about. And we should understand that if this trail project, if this does get approved tonight, which I'm in favor and like to support, that those be considered as well. And I look to see what kind of metric we want to use, but I think at least including that compared to what we currently experience would be important for me. And that's the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Great comments. Monty?
Matt, you were very thorough there in covering a lot of really important points, so I won't go through them. I agree with everything you've said, and I do want to, recognize a lot of people who's put a lot of time and effort into this. This has been a decade or more in the making to get to where we are today, and today is not the end point. But obviously, all of you who did a ton of work looking at how to approach this topic in a very logical, constructive way, protecting our watershed, focusing on safety, talking with different user groups, lots and lots of time spent having conversations to try to understand issues and concerns and come up with something that's sensible. I think it's extremely impressive, the amount of time and effort and thought that this table that was developed reflects. And I would imagine that this process is not only obviously very important for us here, but I can imagine other water districts or other land use agencies wondering these same issues and wondering how this is going to go, and maybe even watching to see how this unfolds, because this is an issue that is being faced elsewhere. We're hardly having the only experience of how to incorporate mountain biking into an area where it hadn't previously been. I think that it's really important that we're going to be collecting a lot of really valuable information so that we can see how this is going. This is a pilot. And I would agree with the point that Matt is, I think, shown a spotlight on, which is I don't either see this as like the camel's nose under the tent, opening up the entire watershed to a mountain bike park. But at the same time, I think making this change makes sense because we have, I think, honestly, an equity and inclusion issue to say we have had a shift in demographic use of our watershed lands. And if we can do that in a way that is protective of our main central mission of safe and resilient water supplies and protecting our watershed, that's a reasonable course to take. But it is a pilot, and collecting the data that we're going to be doing to see how it's going is going to be really, really important. I want to make sure that we help this to succeed. And so I'm going to make a couple points on this. And one is, I want to make sure that we really are spend some time making sure that there's clear signage, and whether we're going to produce a map that's downloadable on our website, something that can be sent to bike stores, that can be shared with bike access groups. I want to make sure that we don't have problems because people are lost. I don't want to have people on poaching trails when they didn't mean to. They just got lost. And the watershed's very networked and can be very confusing. I want to see what we can do to make sure that that's really that doesn't happen to the extent it's going to happen. People are going to get lost, I think, but understanding the difference between unintentional and intentional is going to be an important one. And that takes me to, I think, the really important issue, which is the bike community. This is a really important opportunity to succeed. And if this pilot goes well, I think we will learn a lot of valuable information. I think recreational benefits will improve for, frankly, everybody, and that includes non-bikers, hikers, and equestrian, because we can resolve this unresolved issue that's been going on for so long. I think it improves everybody's experience if we can manage it well. I think it's really important that the bike community really speak to and manage to itself, because while the district is going to do a ton of things to make sure that we are sharing information, what's open, our rules, the structures that we're setting up to ensure safety, but the bike community very much has a very important role. I would almost argue an essential role to make sure that this pilot goes well, and that we don't see an increase in poaching, and that we don't see speed issues, that we don't see an increase in accidents, because if that's what comes out of this pilot, it will make it very hard to move forward. So I really encourage the bike community to take an active role in making this a success, one that I hope that we have. And I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. Jed, your inputs, please.
Yeah, a quick question, following up on Matt's question, Sean. I guess we have 60 miles of trails, and we're considering 6 to be used for these new use. How much of those 60 miles of trails can be used by hikers and horseback riders?
That's a good question. I don't know the exact mileage of horse equestrian routes.
Less than 19 miles.
So like 20 miles.
20 miles. Got it. Okay, great. Once again, I want to thank this group and our community for looking at a recreation plan that has not been updated for 20 years. To me, in reviewing this in detail with the staff, I think it is thoughtful and it is an incremental step. And I hope that we'll come out of this better than we were before. In fact, I'm convinced. I think one thing that is overlooked is that what this board has approved and continues to approve is a historic investment in protecting our watershed and historic investment in updating and our trail system. There's a multidimensional effort here. And I believe that we're going to come out of this with a much safer, better, more thoughtful management of this tremendous land that we protect. I want to second 3 comments that I heard from other board members. One is that I do believe that we should add social trail review to this process. And so I would encourage us to make that a priority for your efforts. The second is I would like to make sure that we review night riding and the impact of night riding on our watershed and how we will enforce and deal with that impact. And the third, and I might want to have a second of my comment here because I'm not sure I heard it right, but I believe what Matt said is the importance of having these quarterly stakeholder meetings where we're working with a broad set of our community. I think these are critical. I think building trust in our community is critical. And I believe what I heard, Sean, and so what I guess I'm proposing, and maybe if we have a second, that'd be great, is that the stakeholder meetings will include multiple constituents, including folks from Marin Conservation League, from native plants, and from different recreation users. I'm going to nominate Nona Dennis and Dave Long and Larry Miniges as potentially 3, but I'd like to suggest that these potentially be informal and that they specifically review the impact of this pilot set of projects. And I understand there's some PTSD about his former citizen groups that may not have worked well. But I want to make sure, Sean, that you and Ben and this staff realize that there's some trust building that is needed in this community. And trust is built through communication, and I think we can do significantly better. I'm very happy that you suggested that we have these stakeholder meetings. I want to formalize and have your commitment that you will do these, and that as a result, we will be looking at the impact of the efforts. And with your commitment to do that, and if we need a second to do that, then I am fully supportive of this plan. I think if we don't find ways to build that trust back in our community and have these quarterly meetings, understanding impact, it's going to be hard for me to be supportive. I want to thank Don for your report on enforcement. I think that is critical. You've done an outstanding job, and I think measurement of this success is riding a lot on your tremendous team. One small comment that I would accelerate your review, Sean, of the Pumpkin Ridge stairs. I've checked it out. I think that's probably a danger zone. Yes, you can get people to hop off the bikes, but I'd probably suggest that you accelerate the work around there and make sure it's not negatively impactful on the flora and fauna that are nearby. And lastly, I just want to say that I expect that these pilot trails will be the most scrutinized in the history of Marin water. But with that analysis, I expect that there'll be lessons that we learn that can apply to the entire trail system. And I hope that if we do this right, that we will come out of this with a much better set of data and policies to protect the system and to be better stewards of this. So it's really interesting that by adding these pilots, I think that we will be better stewards of the land, better stewards of the species that we protect and our staff. So and our users of the land. So I'm hopeful that that's how the community will respond to this, and I look forward to seeing how it goes.
Thanks, Jed. A lot there. I want to give Sean a chance to respond to the quarterly meeting structure and whether that's something that we should come back to at a later meeting to continue to flesh out.
Yeah, I think our intention with the quarterly meetings is to get various stakeholder groups all out there collectively. I think one of the things we understand from our conversations that we've continued to have through the planning process is The district is, the land management entity here. We're not the ones that are going to build the culture and ensure the responsible recreation happens among visitor groups. We need our partners with each of these community groups to be helping educate and inform their constituents on how to recreate on the watershed when they're visiting, to comply with our regulations, and to visit and, support others while they're there. And so I think the benefit of the quarterly meetings is that it will be multi-stakeholder. We'll have all the, invitations go out to everyone who wants to be included in that. And we'll do site visits to each of those pilot program trails, because I think it's critical that we get folks on the ground, out on the sites, to understand how things are going. And if there's impacts that we're seeing, we can have that collective conversation around what can be done to address it.
Great. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying, Ranjiv. So yeah, I'm looking for more than that, Sean. So what I'm looking for specifically is to bring these folks in to review how we're measuring impact.
So in the document today, we provided an outline and a framework for monitoring each of the trails. And I think that was based on input that we received through these planning processes, and from a technical standpoint meets the objective of the pilot program. And we'll continue to have those conversations with folks in the field if we need to adaptively manage or make additions to that. Those conversations will be ongoing. And I think what we want to think about is, where is this taking us, and how do we build those kind of ongoing, collaborative relationships so that we can update our roads and trails plan and get to where you were speaking of, which is making those long-term improvements to our system through having real conversations about access that people will support, and restoration opportunities that are the most critical for the resources on the mountain.
So are you willing to have quarterly meetings with these folks that specifically review the impact of this pilot plan and how it's going?
Let me jump in if I could. I think there's likely going to be an adaptive management approach to how we're coordinating with different stakeholders based in part how the pilots are going. So I think the initial quarterly with all stakeholders is probably a good starting point. But like everything we do, absolutely, as issues arise or particular concerns arise, we will absolutely. I mean, we do understand the focus and the importance to do this well and do this right. And so we are not going to skimp on talking to folks and getting out there and addressing concerns that come up. So I think at this point, it may be tough. I mean, maybe that's monthly or bi-monthly or quarterly, or, maybe there's different groups and who we identified tonight necessarily. So I think the answer is wholeheartedly yes, but structurally, initially, we're talking about these quarterly all stakeholder meetings, and we'll adapt as comments come into the board, to staff, as we see particular issues arise. For example, we may want to meet more often than quarterly with the equestrian community if there's particular concerns there. So there's really a swath of potential needs and opportunities that I think will reveal themselves as we go forward. But I think the overall message you're really imparting, and where we get it, is don't skimp on the communication, the coordination, the outreach, the transparency, and we are absolutely committed to that.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing public comment before we get to the voting part. But I really think that we have a lot of repairing to do with this community regarding trust, and I want to see some level of commitment that we bring folks in to measure impact of these trails and this effort, and that they are included and have their questions answered, because it doesn't seem to me like they feel like they've had their questions answered so far.
Yeah, I'll
clarify. Sorry.
Maybe I'll just jump in quickly, Jed. I really appreciate your call for transparency on the impact issues, and your push for even better stakeholder engagement. I do not support impact measurements by external groups. I believe that the impact measurements should be a study designed by our experts and implemented by those experts. The results should be shared with everyone on an ongoing basis for debate, discussion, but I would definitely not support
Yeah, that's not what I, what you,
stakeholders getting involved.
that's not what I'm recommending. I'm just recommending communication. I'm not recommending they tell us what to do.
Great.
Sean, we do have, you've shown us tonight what data we're going to be collecting to determine the impacts of these pilots. Is that something that could be summarized maybe every 6 months at these stakeholder meetings, or that cadence, is that even effective or not? Or looking for, we don't need data every week, so we're not going to see trends. We need it over a certain time, but including what we're saying we're measuring when we talk to these stakeholders, either some sort of summary or outline as we meet with them.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. That the quarterly events, we're going to bring forward what information we've collected to that date. It'll change. It won't be all of it every time. If we're doing the visitor surveys every year, then, we'll review that every year. If we're doing the transects every 6 months, we'll review that every 6 months. If we're doing the early detection rapid response, we'll review that seasonally when appropriate. So I think this will have a natural cadence to it over the 2-year period.
That's great.
It might help to if that cadence can be even written out in advance. It might even be able to say, like, on this quarterly schedule, these are the things that we'll have, and that way folks know that it's coming up and it's not lost, and that they know where it's at within the cycle, because there is a cadence to the data collection, and it doesn't make sense to try to jump ahead of that.
I'll second that request.
I have some comments.
Yes, Larry, please.
First of all, I will second Jed's motion. I think it's a good approach. I think you guys have done a great job. Monty mentioned 10 years. It's actually more like 20. It's been going on as far as I can remember. I joined the board in 2004, and it was a topic at that point in time. So I think it's nice that we're making some progress. I would like to have some feedback on a series of the comments that were made about the adequacy of some of the work that was done. I think we can head off a long discussion by addressing some of those issues. There was comments about invasive species and about unusual species that are in the area from a botanist. And there was a bunch of questions about the issue of our CEQA choice. I think we need to address that because it's coming with the comments. And if we can address it to people's satisfaction, then perhaps we can eliminate the comments or at least work around them.
Larry, are you looking for inputs on those right now, specifically around questions of
how we define the CEQA?
Okay, you'd like to
the plants or the CEQA?
Yeah, which one?
The CEQA is what I was really talking about.
Okay.
The plant, I don't know. I'm just responding to what I read.
Right. Well, Molly, I'm guessing you have some thoughts on the CEQA process.
Sure, I can try to speak to the approach that we took, and that is we believe in looking at in the development of the pilot and trial programs that the exemptions that we found were applicable, especially given the amount of analysis that was done and to look at whether there were any exceptions to the application of those exemptions. We do think these are for information gathering. They're temporary. They're not going beyond the use of existing facilities. They're within the use of existing facilities. So all of those things that we discussed, I think, thoroughly in the staff report, in the resolutions, in the ordinance, are all applicable here and are all held up by the substantial evidence that's been put in the record, both through the staff report and information included with the staff report, as well as a very thorough report that you heard tonight from our watershed staff. So hopefully that addresses your questions, Larry.
Well, they aren't my questions. They're coming from people like Nona Dennis, and I'm just the messenger. So
Right. Hopefully it addresses Nona Dennis's questions. I did read all the comments, and I think that we were very thoughtful. Staff was very thoughtful in the approach that we took, and I think also extremely thorough in looking at, what are we doing here? What's appropriate? What have others done under similar circumstances that seems to have fit? We looked at it independently. We wanted to make sure that there were no exceptions, like I said, that would kick us out of the exemption areas. we feel very comfortable that there's support for the positions that we've laid out carefully in the staff report.
Because Nona is asking us to delay the decision to avoid having to litigate this. So obviously there's some people that see it differently.
Well, I understood, and I think we can hear public comment. If there's something new that we haven't considered, we're certainly listen for that. But currently, I think that, this is where we are, and there's always a possibility that someone's going to disagree. But that doesn't mean that we were not diligent, careful, thorough, and legally compliant with CEQA when we took the approaches that we took.
Thank you, Molly. Just one more thing before we go to public comment. I think the only one good thing about this is we did not invent this problem, right? These conversations are happening right now across the country. There was a great article about managing mountain biking versus environmental preservation recently in the Yellowstonian. I don't know how many of you saw that, but please look it up online. It is the most thoughtful piece that I've ever seen on this topic. And I want to read you one sentence out of that. The truth is that every outdoor activity has an impact. When faced with a choice between the desire to bike, hike, trail run, ski, horseback ride, or whatever else you do, and the need to stay the hell off the landscape for its preservation, we are really confronted with a hard philosophical question. Are our human wants more important than the well-being of a natural ecosystem? We're all wrestling with that. Given that, this is a good pilot plan. It's good. It's not perfect. But I think we all appreciate that phrase, right? Perfect is the enemy of the good. I actually went and looked this up on Wikipedia to make sure I had it right. Here's what Wikipedia says. Insistence on perfection often prevents implementation of good improvements. One should not let the struggle for perfection stand in the way of appreciating or executing on something that is imperfect, but still of value. I hope we can all keep that in mind as we move forward with the discussion today. And with that, I'll open it up for public comments.
Okay, we have about 25. Majority are in person, so I'm going to read 3 names at once.
Sorry, Terry. I'd also, given the number of people that we know have already indicated they'd like to speak, I'd like to reduce the time to 2 minutes.
Yes.
You've done. Thank you.
Okay, the first 3 speakers, Robert Frankel, Ken Strong, and Craig Hanna. Robert Frankel, please.
Thank you for the opportunity. Robert Frankel, 78-year-old hike leader, been on your watershed 45 years. This is a program to displace hikers. How am I supposed to lead 10 people on the Arturo, Madrone, or any of the other trails when I'm faced with bicycles coming at me from every direction? Have any of you actually been out there on these trails that you propose? Every single one of you needs to get out there with your ranger and take a look. Second, I attended the bike committee some years ago. The Bosch rep says you can't determine by observation what's class 1 or whether it's an electric motorcycle. So you're turning those loose on us with absolutely no enforcement with 6 rangers that you have available to you. And thirdly, I'm sorry, this is a very sad day. If Ranger Jim Vitek were here, he would be terribly ashamed that you're taking the trail that he built, named for his wife, and turning it over to the bicycles. If you take a look at the Madrone Trail, it's a trench. It's this wide, and you want us to share that with bicycles. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Frankel. Ken Strong, please.
Hi, Ken Strong from Greenbrae. Only 35 years hiking on the mountain and 20 years mountain biking on the mountain. I'm generally in favor of a pilot project like this, but I have a couple of specific concerns. One, I think the Sunnyside Trail is a poor choice. It's probably one of the most heavily used trails in the watershed from my experience. There's fishermen on it all the time, particularly when at high water. They're going to be right up next to the trail. I think that's going to be a problem. They're walking back and forth with rods and shares and cases. So I think that's a heavily impacted trail. There's also a lot of children on that trail. The dam trail, which you guys looked at, seems to me to have better connectivity with top of Schaefer Grade and getting to the Bontemps Dam. And I just think you ought to reconsider the Sunnyside Trail. A couple of more general things. First of all, in terms of your monitoring plan, you're talking about, from what I can tell, photo monitoring to try and determine the impact. You said you're not going to try and determine the impact difference between mountain bikes and e-bikes. And I think that's wrong, because if we do have significant impacts, people are going to want to know whether or not it's the heavier e-bikes causing the impact or all bikes in general. Particularly, you might consider during wet weather, maybe some of these trails shouldn't be accessible for bikes, because during wetter weather, they're going to get rutted up. That's just inevitable. And finally, on signage and things like that, I think that's hugely important. And I'm glad to hear that's going to be an emphasis. But right now, people don't pay any attention to the little signs you've got that say no bikes on trails. The signage is going to have to be substantial. Communication and outreach is going to have to be substantial. I don't know what your plans are to reach out to Strava and Trail Forks and some of these other mountain biking programs, because these trails are going to end up on those programs as a result of the rider comments and things like that.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Hi, Craig Hanna here. I'm a longtime mountain biker, 30 years. Go to Moab, go to Tahoe, go to Oregon. I love mountain biking. I also love hiking. And I am vehemently opposed to allowing motor-driven cycles on these trails. This is what they are. They're motorcycles. And to the previous speaker's point, you have no idea how powerful they are. Some of these go 60, 70 miles an hour, and you have no idea. And you don't.
Thank you, sir. Kathy Rizzo, Karen Hanna, and Kelly Bennett.
Hello. I had a whole thing written up, but then after seeing the presentation, I kind of changed it around. That looks amazing on paper, but the reality that we deal with every day on that watershed is really misaligned with what we just saw. The survey, which everybody weighs very heavily on, the online survey, the link broke. I talked to over 25 people who wanted to be included in that and was unable to access it, and it was never brought around again. The on-site surveys, I've talked to over 100 hikers. They didn't know about it. They weren't included. Not one horse person was included in that survey. And yet it's one of the measurements we're using that this program is successful and should be ahead. When we talk about slow zones, I've talked to directors and staff about, hey, if you're going to do this, could you do some slow zones? And what I get back is, well, that's not the experience the bikers are looking for. So how am I supposed to get comfort around that? Jed is right, that we're being felt that we don't matter. We come to these meetings, we talk, we do everything. And for what? We don't matter. It never makes an impact. Everything stays the same. So it just blows me away. And when you're talking about the trails that you've selected, good sight lines, room to pass, good footing, are all the key components of successful multi-use trails. Half of those that you just showed don't have any of those. And the two that I'm most upset about is Fish Gulch and Madrone. You've made those directional downhill. Do you know how scary that is for a hiker or a horse person to be subjected to that? We hike up those, and we do that because it's a safer route for us. And for us to be asked to go down those hills, when they don't follow any of these. There's no room to pass. There's over 14 switchbacks on Madrone. They're all eroded out. Horses can barely get on it. And we're being asked to share it. Please take that off your list.
Next speaker
It's
is
not safe.
Karen Hanna, please.
Hello, I'm Karen Hanna. I have no problem sharing certain trails that are created and maintained as multi-purpose trails that have specific criteria similar to Marin open space. I am concerned about the signage. Right now, the signage out there is many people don't see it. I've been told that they don't see those signs. And also for the education, I don't know how you're going to educate this number of population in a month. You'll need rangers. If you're doing 9 trails, you'll need 18 rangers, one at each end of those trails that are on pilot to educate everyone. Because I've talked to over 25 hikers recently. They didn't even know the pilot program was in existence. They were shocked. Many of them said, well, that sounds dangerous. Many of them, I asked, they said they would not hike those trails anymore if there were bikes out there. I just want you to take into consideration that one bad injury can affect a family forever, and it could be prevented. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly Bennett, and then Sandy Goldman, please.
Hi, Kelly Bennett, Fairfax. I'm a horse owner, mountain biker, hiker. I've lived in Fairfax for 25 years, used the mountain even before I moved here. Just want to say thank you to the board and to the staff, to the rangers and to the community for all the hard work that everyone's put in. You know, everyone's got a view and everyone's very passionate about it. I think that everyone on and every point of that star has really thought deeply and done their homework and their research. And I just want to say thank you to everyone and urge the board to pass both pilot programs. Thank you.
Thank you. After Ms. Goldman is Tracy McDermott and Larry Minikis. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sandy Goldman. I've been hiking Mount Tam for over 50 years, less vigorously than I used to. I want to read 3 quotes from the documents supporting this. The first one, the program involves the continued operation and minor alteration of existing trails that have historically supported similar recreational activities. Hiking, biking, and horseback riding are not similar. They get someone from one place to another, but that's where the similarity disappears. I think as an opening statement for justifying this it's just misleading. Continuing in that same paragraph, there will be no expansion of the use of these trails, and any modifications made will be minor and necessary to ensure the safety and usability. How can you say there will be no expansion of use if you're introducing a whole new class of users, unless all the hikers just go someplace else, which is a distinct possibility? Then you might have no increase in use. That, I hope, is not the goal. And one of my hiking experiences, well, more than once, I've hiked the North Side Trail quite a bit. I was very pleased to see it didn't make the cut. It's a lot of it is on a steep side slope. And I have encountered 20 years ago, 15 years ago, more recently than that, bikers on that trail. And I am invariably the one who has to step off onto the steep side slope so they can get by with their machines. Once things get much wider, there's just not room for bikers and hikers on many of these trails.
I appreciate your comment. Tracy McDermott, please, and then Larry Minikis.
Hi, Tracy McDermott. I'm 75. I have ridden my horse on that hill for 50 years. Different horses. Not, not one of those trails is not traveled by bikes today. E-bikes, regular bikes, and at speed. The trails identified for these trials are all the downhill run that gets the bikers downhill to either Phoenix Lake or Fairfax the fastest. Okay? And as Kathy said, we ride up those hills. They're strenuous. They're vertical or very, very rutted and steep. So now we get to have a horse, it's 3 feet minimum, knee to knee, when you're sitting on a horse. Bicycle rack, the handlebars, is at least 2. None of those trails on any of those trails are 6 feet wide. And even at that, when you pass, the knee is out, the elbows are out, dude's got helmet on, earbuds, they're not listening, slow down, they're going, yeah. So believe me, it's dangerous. It's dangerous for hikers. I could never take my grandchildren up there because if they decided to, let's say, squirt across the road to get a look at Keene Rock, who's going to stop it? One injury and every ratepayer pays. Every ratepayer pays because eventually responsibility will be fixed. You will be liable.
Thank you, ma'am. Larry Minikis, Laura Cheriton, and then Bill Keene.
Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of the Marin Conservation League Parks and Open Space Committee because Terry Thomas, our committee chair, could not be here this evening. While we respect the district's efforts to balance recreational use and environmental protection and appreciate and respect the tremendous amount of effort staff has put into this project, there are concerns that the current proposal does not adequately meet the objectives without further scrutiny and encourage a conservative approach going forward. We urge the board to take a cautious approach to the watershed trail sharing pilot program due to concerns specifically around the potential for increased habitat fragmentation, impacts to rare plant communities, and increased wildlife impacts, and particularly impacts to small creatures, including snakes, lizards, and newts that often tend to sun on open ground or migrate across these trails, as potentially being crushed in larger numbers by bike tires going across these trails. We believe these known concerns need to be more adequately addressed. I want to thank you for your time and consideration. I'd like to yield my extra time to Nona Dennis. Thank you.
Laura Cheriton, please, and Bill Keene.
I don't know how I can get these visible. Hi, my name is Laura Cheriton. I live on Panoramic Highway. I've been hiking on the mountain for 50 years. Okay, thank you. I'm showing you these because of the amount of degradation that occurs on legally traveled roads, and these are on the sides. This is a violation of the mission statement. It's antithetical to the mission statement, and all this will degrade into the watershed and impact fisheries. Thank you. And then this one. These are just some of the animals that I've seen run over, and I'm glad Larry Minikis brought it up. Mount Tam on the 20th of June did a study and released their information, and they're saying that caution, trend unknown for reptiles, amphibians, birds, and plants on the mountain. So you have to look at the baseline where you're starting, and you need to have a biologist's reports before you even start something like this. Wildlife can't adapt to the speed of bicycles, and they will be killed, and we have evidence. Consistent trail degradation puts sediment in the watercourse, impacting endangered salmon and western pond turtles. The safety of bike batteries is unenforceable. and I've been doing a lot of reading on that. The safety for senior hikers who are the dominant users in the watershed. And as indicated by the Alta study, which has been completely ignored and not even brought up here. I mean, there's 70% of the users are hikers and around 52 or 3% are seniors. So why that information wasn't incorporated is kind of discriminatory. And enforcement is virtually non-existent.
Mr. Bill Keen, then Tom Martell and Lisa Argento.
Good evening. Thank you, board and staff, for taking this really needed step in the watershed. This has been going on my entire life, and I'm appreciative that you're finally taking some steps to allow trail sharing. I just want to make a few points. Other areas of the country, the stuff is already happening. Bellingham, Washington, Bentonville, Arkansas, and the list goes on all over the country. And you're just matching where the use is going. And I think I heard it from a couple board members. With regard to the number of trails, you're talking about 6 miles of bike trails. If you just go by your user survey, which by the way was in person, I think, we would have 0.55 miles of equestrian trail. We'd have about 21 miles of bike trail, and you'd have all the stuff open to bikes. But that's not what you're doing. You're doing something that's measured and really looking at expanding some use where there hasn't been any. And we're not asking for the equestrians to lose a single mile of trail. With regard to class 1 e-bikes, those go like 15 miles an hour at the top speed. So we're not talking about 60-mile-an-hour bikes. And I think there's a lot of seniors out there who are not able to get on the watershed, but with an e-bike. So I appreciate you doing that. Education can be done by MCBC and Access for Bikes, and we're committed to doing that at Access for Bikes. Access for Bikes would welcome sitting down at the table and talking with the other user groups. We've tried and offered to offer that before and been turned away. So we'd love to sit in the same room with them. As for where we are, we're not at the end of this process. We're not even at the beginning of the end, but maybe we're at the end of the beginning. So let's try to make this all work. Let's work together. I'd love to sit down with Larry Minikis and others and just try to figure out how to make this stuff work and that we're all safe on the watershed. So again, thank you, board and staff. I really appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you. Tom Martell, please, and Lisa Argento.
Thank you all for all your efforts this evening. I just want to modify, call a spade here. We all know that this whole thing is about a highly motivated group of very massively funded people who've hijacked the water district, and now they want to take over it and make it into their own. I'm not the only one who thinks this way. If you look at ProPublica, that they discovered the MCBC, they're funded for $1,350,000 this last year, 150,000 of which went to the head of MCBC. And they think, they suspect too, they got a score, I believe, of 29 out of 100 in this. So they don't believe that this group is actually involved in trying to help the underserved population or trying to help handicapped people get on the mountain. Basically, this is a battle between people who have a little bit and don't spend a lot. We have sticks to hikers. We may have a backpack. We may have a little bit of water. And we're fighting people who have $10,000 bikes and, mammals, middle-aged men in Lycra running up and down the mountain with the speed trials. And that's what's going on. That's the battle. And the battle will be won by the money. We all know that. So let's just cut out the baloney. I know it's baloney. You know it's baloney. ProPublica knows it's baloney. So let's just call a spade a spade. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Argento, Ann Adams, and Daniel May.
I thank you all for your efforts in having this hearing and allowing us to speak our minds. I just I had called to complain about the erosion around the steps on the Arturo Trail, one of the trails that's going to be opened up, because the bikes are rutting out the trail along with the erosion around the staircase. The ranger had told me at the water district that he didn't have time to get over to the arterial because all the damage done on another trail. And here you are going to allow them to do that to more trails. It's almost as if somebody robbed the bank. So you say, well, we'll just open the vault. It saves us some time. So anyway, I actually took photos of a person that's actually in this room. He's on my cell phone, on his bicycle, on a trail, clearly marked no bikes. His photograph, he was coming up the trail at the end of the trail, right where the sign was. I have a picture of him. I had told the ranger that I had a photo, and he said, oh my God, never take pictures of them because that will cause a confrontation. We don't want you to get hurt. So these people break the rules. They're destructive of in the environment, and they threaten old ladies with white hair. So, I don't know why we're rewarding these people by allowing them to ride on the trails. And the other issue was with the e-bikes. I think they do go a little faster than 15 miles per hour because I got passed by one on Panoramic Highway while I was going 30. So they do go pretty fast. And that would be the next question. Has there been any kind of coordination with Caltrans on these bicycles, these e-bikes, and whether they are actual vehicles that use the roads, or are they actually bicycles? Because it doesn't seem, they can pass me, then they seem like vehicles.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Ann Adams and then Daniel May, please.
My name is Ann Adams, and I want to thank everyone for coming to share their opinions and perspectives. And I'm here to speak as a senior citizen hiker, unfortunately senior citizen, but I'm here. I've been a cyclist on the mountain. I've been a hiker on the mountain. I've been an equestrian on the mountain, and I am not against bikes. But my concern is the safety of people who can't move quickly to respond or react to something that they are probably going to be unprepared for. And I do use poles, and I can't react quickly anymore. And I do not feel safe sharing single track trails with bikes. I do with horses, but not with bikes. I've not had pleasant experiences with bikes on trails. And I'm sorry to say that, but that's been my experience. And I wish that hikers and senior citizens had been included in the surveys and reported in the meetings, because I think it's a very integral, significant part of the user population for the water district lands. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daniel May, James Mackey, and then John Arnold, please.
Hello, thank you for this meeting. I appreciate the views of the other speakers. I want to share a little anecdote from my years as a waterfront director. Without enforcement, people will run their speedboats right by where the swimmers are swimming. There is no enforcement now. I've talked to a lot of rangers. I'm out on the trails about 3 times a week, and I've been doing it for the last 10 years when I moved up here. During that time, I've seen intrusion of bicycles on trails that are marked no bikes. Inevitably, the response is, I didn't see the sign. The signs, of course, are 3 inches by 3 inches, and it's confusing. Bikes get into places where they see no recourse but to go down a trail. Until there's enforcement, I think these problems that the other folks have spoken of regarding their feelings of safety, and I'm a senior as well, I'm 74, will continue to be front and center, and will in essence constitute a turning away from the glorious history of Marin County as a leader in environmentalism. What? Gotta touch it?
Okay.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. I gotta keep touching. So that's a big problem. Now you've got just a 6 mile increase, but the Sunnyside Trail, will put pressure on game. There's big deer between Sunnyside and the opening to Sky Oaks. The Pumpkin and the Madrone Trail will put pressure on the Pilot Knob Trail where there are frequently bikes. All over the Taylor Trail will be pressured by the inclusion of these loops to allow bikes to get into that country. So without enforcement, this is a bad plan. We need to put limits on bikes. Unfortunately, it's just the reality. We live in a community of 10 million people, and we have a very limited resource. Thank you.
John Arnold, please, and Krista Hoff.
Well, first I want to thank you for letting me speak. Can you hear me okay? Do I have to push a button on or what?
Just don't touch the button.
Okay, don't touch the button. Okay. I have a first question for the National Parks people. How many tickets have been given out in the last year for bikes going over the speed limit on the trails? I'd like an answer now. Okay, that's it. Rest my case. Next, the signage that we have. Last time I was on a hike and I was with somebody with a dog came on where it says no dogs. The lady says, "Oh, I thought that line meant you could have a leash on the dog, and it's okay." Can you imagine that? Okay, so that signage is definitely not working. Okay, now next question: who will have the right of way between a mountain bike and a street bike on a trail? Who has the answer to that question? Nobody's got an answer to that question. You got signs for bikers give way to this, hikers give way to this. What are the mountain bikers going to give way to? Is that going to be on a sign? Thank you, boy. You guys are doing great. I love your answers. Now, I believe that this whole thing should be put to a public vote. Okay, a public vote by the people, for the people, by the people, not by any other district or any other type of municipality. This is a vote for the people. We are the people, not the bikers, not the hikers. I just wanted to go to a vote and I will accept whatever comes up to that thing. So, a vote. So who has right of way? Mountain bikes or street bikes on the mountain trail or mountain bikes? Does anybody have an answer? Anybody have an answer? A mountain bike and a street and an e-bike. Who has the right of way? I'm saying between the two of you. I'm not getting answers from him. I want the board to give this answer.
He just took the comment.
Okay, I'd like to have it as an issue to look up.
Sir.
Huh?
Your comment's already up.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
John Arnold, please.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. James Mackey. Okay. Krista Huff and then Linda Novi, please.
I'm not going to touch it. I usually don't write things down. I usually just try to speak. But I've changed so many, as I've listened to people's comments, I've changed things. So I've decided to write some things down. I'd first just like to thank the board for being open-minded and forward-thinking, which is what I've really been hoping to see since I've lived in Marin. I'd also like to thank the board for having the courage to kind of break away from these outdated norms from the past. I think this program is going to bring Marin in step with what's happening in the rest of the country and the way recreation is being managed in the rest of the country. Before tonight, I had some different opinions, but I feel like after sitting here tonight and listening to other people talk, what I really feel at this time is that the groups that desire to bar bikes from trails are mostly focused on just a deep disdain for other trail users that don't use the trails like they do. They desire to exclude other users. And when I hear comments like we're being ignored, we don't matter anymore, where do we go? I just think when I'm a hiker, which is very frequently, I have access to everything. I can go anywhere I want. But as soon as I throw my leg over my bike, almost all that access is gone. And so I don't I don't see that as valid because I see that as a hiker, I can go anywhere. I have access to anything. I don't feel that I'm being displaced. I know what it's like to be passed by a bike on the trail. It happens to me frequently. I've been all over the country, and there's a way to manage this that everybody can work together and use these trails together. It just takes education and patience and community outreach. And I think that this is something that we can do. It just is going to take some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Krista Huff and then Linda Novi, please.
Hi, my name is Krista Hoff. I live in Fairfax. I grew up here and have hiked Mount Tam for my whole life. I'm a mom now, and I bring my 2 little kids to Mount Tam frequently. My son loves to hike there. My little girl is in a backpack most of the time because she's 1.5, but she gets off and hikes also. I've never felt like they were in danger when we were being passed by bikes on any of the trails that are up there. They are but my children are very unpredictable and they run all over the place. But I've felt safe every time I visited with them. I'm also now the off-road director for Marin County Bicycle Coalition, taking over from my predecessor, Tom Boss. I want to thank you so much for your time and diligence that you've put into this. It was very thorough looking at that report and all the consideration that's gone into the impact of everybody on the mountain and how that we can share the trails most effectively. I look forward to stakeholder meetings. I think there's a lot, like was said previously, a lot of trust that can be rebuilt or can be built between these groups. I'm eager to work on that with my other stakeholder groups. And I think the Earth in general can use more champions. Mount Tam specifically can use more champions. I think by bringing the mountain biking community into the fold, you have more champions to be there and look out for invasive plants for your early detection rapid response program. We are happy to show up and do trail work and pull broom and do the work that needs to be done on these trails for bikes, but also for all trail use.
Thank you. Linda Novi, then Nick Fan, and then Ginger Howard.
Hi, Linda Novi, I'm president of Marin Horse Council. I live in Fairfax as well. Marin Horse Council is not in favor of this project as it is proposed for reasons of safety concerns and displacement of foot people, that is hoofed people and hikers and dog walkers. You've dangled a couple things in front of us for the last few years, such as directional trails. We're going to use directional trails. We find out now the directional trails are downhill. That doesn't feel safe. And you've heard already many people comment on Madrone Trail, for example, that I recently hiked. And it's a trough. It's very hard for anybody to pass. I'm not sure what improvements Sean and Carl have in mind. Directors have stated multiple times, and you've said it tonight, and I was happy to hear several directors, Director Sampson, Schmidt, Smith, talk about tying in improved behavior on the mountain. That has to happen. And yes, Jed, trust needs to be built, and trust is built on behavior. And we need to see improved and compliant behavior that's considerate of other people. And that doesn't mean going 15 miles an hour around a blind turn, because that's a speed limit. It means slowing down to about 1 or 2 miles, because that's how fast the rest of us are going. The monitoring, I welcome being part of any kind of stakeholder group. But I'd like to see visitor experience or citizen complaint reports be included. And for rangers, I'd like to see an assessment of how many rangers are needed to bring the watershed to a higher level of compliance. Thank you.
Nick, please, then Ginger Howard.
I am a Fairfax resident, over 30 years. I'm a senior citizen. I'm a hiker, wildlife photographer, and mountain biker. I'm really polite. I try to leave people smiling when I see them on the trail. If we're going opposite directions, especially on a narrow trail, I'll stop, I'll get off. Usually pretty good at making them laugh. I'm just another demographic. And I just want you to understand, we're not all trying to kill you. I'm just a nice old guy. And by the way, I can't really ride my regular bike anymore. I got bad back, I'm getting old. I need to ride an e-bike. Cannot ride without the e-bike. Oh, type 1 bike. I do not support type 2 or type 3 e-bikes on the mountain. They shouldn't be allowed. It scares me in the streets to see little kids on 28-mile-an-hour bikes. We are not in support of that. By the way, I think your plan is terrific. Thank you for your support and your insight. And yes, we are trying to catch up with the rest of the country. That's about it for me.
Thank you. Ginger Howard, please. Oh, Charlotte and Tessa. Sorry, ladies.
Hello, my name is Ginger Howard, and I'm the senior captain of the Redwood High School mountain biking team and a youth ambassador of MCBC. I speak on behalf of my team that if we get access to these trails, we will put in a great amount of work to maintain these trails and protect the nature around them. There's a stereotype that mountain bikers don't care about the nature and preserving the environment, but this is not true at all.
My name is Tessa, and I'm a junior on the team. That stereotype is quite the opposite. I personally know mountain bikers love mountain biking because it is in nature. If we didn't value nature, we'd be out biking on the roads. I can assure you that our team values taking care of the beautiful land around us, and we do not want to do anything to harm it.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Philkill, and I'm a senior. I ride for the Redwood mountain bike team. I also want to point out that hikers and bikers all want the same thing. We all have the same interests. We love the outdoors, we value our time outside, and we want to get exercise in a fulfilling way. As a biker who has ridden nationally and internationally under USA Cycling, that means I've been on many bike teams. I can assure you that trail etiquette is something that is covered right off the bat. That's something we're tested on. That's something that we have to sign forms saying that we understand that is absolutely required. We have to be nice. We have to slow down. We do say hello, say thank you, and all the above. Marin is the birthplace of mountain biking, and I think that restricting it or not giving access to these trails is honestly doing it a disservice. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, ladies. Andrew Levine and then Vernon Huffman, please. Andrew Levine, then Vernon Huffman.
Hello, I'm Andrew Levine. I'm from Mill Valley. I've been hiking and biking on the mountain for over 50 years. We hear a lot of hyperbolic comments here about bikes and e-bikes, but as some folks have mentioned, other agencies in this county, in this state, in this country have figured it out. Excessive enforcement's not what the rest of them do to figure this out. So what we're seeing here is entitled folks are struggling to share, and we're talking about displacement of hikers where 6 miles of trail, less than 10% of the trails are to be shared. The hikers can still use them. And if they don't want to, if they don't find that pleasant, they can use the other 90% of trails where bikes aren't allowed. And I think, we just need to not have the tail wag the dog here. When we look at the spreadsheet you had of all those different trails we're looking at, all but one of those trails on weekdays was seeing less than 5 people a day. So we're talking about displacement. So no cyclists can go on those trails where 5 or fewer people a day are going on them. And in fact, if you even look at the weekend numbers you have, less than a quarter of those trails on the weekends are seeing more than 10 people. So let's just not, overstate what's happening here. And then my last comment would be Sunnyside, I think, is an important trail to keep bikes off of roads. And I think as a pilot, if it has a little more traffic than the others, yes, more than 10 people a day, that's a good place for us to have a pilot to see how our trail sharing works. And I don't think it should be directional. It has to get us off the roads. Has to keep everyone safe. Thank you for all your efforts to help us.
Next is Mr. Vernon Huff, and then I'm going to the attendees on Zoom, Joby and then Nona Dennis.
Hi, Vernon Huffman, Executive Director of Access for Bikes. Most of all, I just want to thank the staff and the directors and Dawn and the Ranger staff for doing a very thorough job. I've been in a lot of the meetings leading up to this, and it's quite impressive, all the data they've collected and the thoughtful way that they've gone about getting this day to come and prepare for today. I just wanted to tell a quick story. In 2010, the Marin County Open Space did something similar to this. They went straight to a RTMP amendment because currently at that time in 2010, bikes weren't allowed on trails. They had an enormous epiphany of a changed demographic. So they anticipated and planned and thoroughly vetted out how it would look to allow bikes on trails. It took 4 years. I went to 16 public meetings. I wrote numerous letters, and so did my constituency. We were polite, and we were part of the solution. And out in December of 2014, a new plan was approved that allowed for change in use and allowed for bikes on trails. It also allowed for non-system trails to become part of the system and allowing bikes on those trails. This is what your neighbors are doing, and Open Space, as we know, owns part of Mount Tam. So it's very important, I believe, to look at what your neighbors are doing. Mount Tam State Park, by the way, is allowing bikes on trails. So the more consistent we are with our neighbors, the better. That way the user will understand the rules as they circle the mountain. And I'm going to tell, I understand the concern in the room, but I'm here to tell you the sky is not going to fall. I do believe we're all going to get along out there as soon as the policies change and we're made to get along. Thank you.
Thank you. Joby, please, and then Nona Dennis.
Good evening, board. Thank you very much for taking my comments, and thank you very much for considering this plan. I'll make my comments brief. I wanted to point out a 2001 study performed by botanist Richard Reeder that noted that we found that hikers have the same effect as bikers do, regardless of the number of trips along the path. Additionally, Aldo Leopold Wilderness Research Institute compared hiking impacts to horses, and that the horses can cause at least 4 times as much impact to trails under the conditions simulated. So what I would like to just say that there are some trails that are ideal for hikers and bikers to share on the watershed. There is a trail that you have indicated that is good for hikers and bikers, that is Mountaintop Trail Air Force Thruway, that has the identical conditions to Northside Trail. That's just dedicated for hikers and equestrians. I would submit that the board should reconsider that use to change the Northside Trail from a safety standpoint. We heard a lot about safety tonight, and that if I'm riding up Eldridge, the best possible path for me to get to Rock Springs Fire Road back down to Fairfax is to take the Northside Trail. It is a slow trail. You can't go very fast because it's so technical, which is great. And it will keep me off the Ridgecrest Highway, which I can't tell you how many times I've almost been hit by cars crossing the double yellow lines, and I'd rather not be affected by that. So that said, I would like to, again, thank the board for their consideration of this plan. Please can reconsider adding Northside to the plan as a pilot program, because I believe that with its low use during the weekday and moderate use, less than 10 users a day, would be an ideal pilot program addition. And I would thank the board for absolutely just giving us the opportunity to take part in being part of a community where we can show everybody that we are a part of the community and we want to do right by everybody in the community.
Nona Dennis and then Phil Sauter.
Hi, thanks very much. Apparently my name has been mentioned in vain already. My focus is really almost entirely on the CEQA approach. I've been working with CEQA for more decades than I want to admit. And so when I receive a staff report that starts out with 4 exemptions, which I had anticipated 3 of those, and there was a 4th one added, I immediately started to parse them and look closely at what you were proposing. The problem is that you did not really propose in detail how you would deal with those trails that you had already had gone through the assessment. They'd been fine-tuned, you had selected them, you named them. And when I started looking, I had my colleagues hike, but I don't anymore. I've looked at them, I've looked at countless examples of deeply rutted, steep, narrow, highly eroded steps that have to be bypassed or bypassed by bikes, compromised in a variety of ways. And as they become more and more worn, they become more and more hazardous to those people on foot, certainly to people on horseback. But the staff report gave no explanation as to how the project would go forward. Would they modify? Would they try to bring these trails even close to marginal design standards for safe shared use or for sustainability? No, apparently the decision was to do only minimal repair, and that's cited such as grading adjustments needed to maintain trail usability. That comes straight out of CEQA exemption class 3. So apparently the idea is to let them deteriorate with additional use, because there will be additional use. These trails are going to be advertised across the region. Continue to deteriorate with additional bike traffic for another 2 years. And this seems to me really unconscionable. So that was one reason we questioned the choice of those exemptions. Thank you.
Phil Sauter, please. And then after Phil Sauter is 8800 and then Mickey Allison.
Good evening, and thanks, Sean and team, for that great report. 3 quick thoughts. A few weeks ago, I was coming down the Conifer Trail, and there was bicycles coming up the trail, and her feet weren't moving, so I figured, okay, that's an e-bike. And I looked over to say hello, and I realized she was on her phone. I said, well, that's a new breed of user on the Water District. Second thing is there's a trail that I used to, or that I still take up to the Woodacre Ridge, and there's a kind of a narrow footpath that was always easily passable. It was marked, no bicycles, no horses or anything like that. But in the winter, it got really deeply rutted, and I realized those were bicycle ruts. So people do go on those trails, and in muddy conditions, it really erodes the trail. Coming back down that trail later that day, I realized my feet were coming out from under me, and I was kind of hanging 10, and I knew when I hit the ground, my back was going to go out, which it did. So I think those trails that are used by bikes do get used harder than foot trails, and they will need a higher level of maintenance, I believe. And then the third thing, there's a water tank along the Conifer Trail. And one day I was going by there and I realized there's broom inside that chain link fence. And I looked around and there wasn't any broom outside the tank area. And I was talking to one of the, not rangers, but one of the watershed folks. And they realized that the tire tracks from the county, from the Water District vehicles are vectors for broom seeds. So I think if you have these trails going through areas of broom, you will need to pay attention and make sure that if they're going through at a time when the broom is seeding, they will be picking up seeds from that bank and will be spreading it along. So I think more attention will need to be paid to broom as part of this evaluation. Thanks.
Thank you. 8800, then Mickey Allison, please.
Hi, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Nancy Okada. I'm a longtime Marin resident, and thank you for taking my comments. Board, I hope that you decide to either kick the can down the road or not do this. You already have a big problem with mountain bikers, rogue bikers, and hikers being run off the trails. And now you're looking at allowing motorcycles on the trails. It's a big mistake. The electric bicycles are electric motorcycles. By allowing these, you're basically pouring gasoline onto a fire of the mountain bike problems you have that you have been unable to contain. This is being done for a special interest group. It's not being done for the public. The public is really being ignored. Please reject this plan. This is really truly, if you pass this, this will be the camel's nose under the tent, and Mount Tam will become a bike park, which it already is for many people in the Bay Area because the East Bay Municipal Water District does not allow bikes in its watershed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, was that Mickey Allison or was that Mickey?
Yes, it's Mickey Allison. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm 81. I tore my knee in a bike accident, literally, and to have walk on essentially no cruciate ligament in my right knee. I've been hiking ever since that accident. I can go out and go places and a lot of stuff, and I have not renewed my pass because of injuries that are not injury, well, some injuries, but also scares by bicyclists. I literally have covered about 2/3 of the trails in the MMWD, and some of the scares that I've had have just literally had bikes coming down behind me when I'm walking on various trails, the cataract trails and those that go off beyond that on the north side of the trails. And it's really frightening. But one of the things I want to add here, and that's why I'm not renewing. So your calculations for people who hike, you don't get those because I haven't been up there since 2020. I was just scared out of my mind out of it. But I want to assist, I have friends who have e-bikes. 3 of them have literally had accidents and had to try and get out. One of them had to get help from other bicycles to get out. People need to, if they have an e-bike, they better damn well have insurance that will get them out, that will pay a ranger to go back and get them and help them out. I mean, it's a critical thing because those bikes are heavy. If you are older, if you aren't strong enough anymore to push it up and down a hill to try, and walk alongside of it, you're going to need help. And it's not, that is a safety thing too. And those tunnels, those huge things that go through that you have a depth, deadly. Bikes are deadly.
Next is Nikki Bullock and then David Long.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a San Rafael resident and just wanted to thank the board for all of the work that you've done to bring this proposal together. I am a hiker, I ride horses, and I am an avid mountain biker. I e-bike as well. I have seen my dad come back from a stroke, and the only way he's been able to get back on a bike or out in the wilderness is on an e-bike. I wanted to speak up. I've heard all of the comments tonight, and I really am just so disappointed by the animosity. Here I work in healthcare, and my husband also works in healthcare, and really getting outside and being on our bikes was the only thing that got us through the pandemic. I think we have a lot of things to be grateful for here in Marin and want to be able to share the use of the beautiful trails on Mount Tam with everybody. I always do my best when I'm mountain biking to stop, to slow and say hello, to comment on how cute people's dogs are, to make sure that people are doing okay. My husband called 911 when someone had been thrown from their horse. I really do try and be the best trail advocate that I can, and feel that there's just a significant demonization of the mountain bike community that really doesn't sit well. And I hope that with this proposal, we can all work together and enjoy the outdoors peacefully. Thank you.
Thank you. David Long, then Bill Engelhardt. Mr. Long, please.
Yes, I'm David Long. I'm with the Marin chapter of the California Native Plant Society. And there's so many things I could talk about this evening, but I'm going to focus primarily on my personal experience. Recently, I walked and photo monitored most of the proposed pilot project trails. As I walked, I took photos of trail conditions with my iPhone. These are geolocated, so you can know exactly where they were taken. In my written comments, there are links to selected photos for each of the trails that I walked. I was taken aback by the amount of erosion on these trails. In many spots, they've evolved into deep trenches and gullies. I think we should call much of the pilot project really sharing a trench. When you put it that way, it's absurd. You're not going to be doing it. Some people, so you have to go off trail. I would not feel safe if a bicycle approached me while I was in one of these trenches. In fact, they're so deep and narrow that I didn't feel safe walking in some of them because I could have broken a leg if I lost my balance. Old stair steps stood out like icebergs where all the surrounding soil was gone. I was there in the dry season. It looked like these would be a quagmire in the wet. I encourage you to look closely at the photos. I also encourage you to walk these trails and draw your own conclusions. Frankly, I was shocked by what I saw. I've seen a lot of trails in my lifetime. I've hiked in 35 states and all over the world, including walking over 400 miles on the Camino de Santiago. These trails are right up there with some of the worst trails I have walked in the world. Terms such as minor maintenance and adaptive management have little meaning in the face of trails this bad. The infrastructure simply will not support multi-use of many of these trails. It really hit home how much a system-wide road and trails inventory is so badly needed that has not been looked at for over 20 years. The conditions on these trails provide a huge incentive for bikes to create detour routes through native vegetation around the many bad spots.
Long. Next speaker is Bill Englehart.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Like many others, I would like to thank the staff and the board for all the work that it's taken us to get us this far. Unfortunately, many of the comments I've heard tonight and throughout this entire process have felt like a case of one group of people who have had unfettered access to 60 miles of trail on Mount Tam for decades, who are uninterested in sharing the mountain with another group who have had no access. It seems that most of the people who have spoken against the pilot program this evening have no desire to make any compromises in order to share the trails with their fellow citizens. I've ridden many places in California, Colorado, Oregon, and Utah, but Marin is the only place I have experienced such anti-mountain bike sentiment and such a lack of access for mountain bikes. Everywhere else I have been, all the trail users find a way to respectfully share the trails, and I don't understand why that seems so difficult in Marin, the birthplace of mountain biking. I'm very supportive of a pilot program that allows mountain bike use of single track trails on Water District land, and honestly was a little disappointed that so little actual single track was included. I was especially disappointed that Northside wasn't included, given that it is a great connector and is one of the many trails that are currently legal for horses. I'm curious about the 7 data collection processes included in the pilot program. It is not clear how this data will be used, and there was no mention of collecting control data from similar non-bike trails to facilitate scientifically supportable comparisons. Without data from similar non-bike trails, it will be impossible to determine if any changes in trail conditions over time are a result of bike use or other factors. I'm also concerned about the lack of success criteria. It's unclear what will be deemed a success, and I'm concerned that any increase in erosion or conflict will be deemed a reason to cancel the program. In closing, I'd like to state my wholehearted support for the pilot program and urge the board to approve the program and potentially increase access for single track. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Next is Nathan. Then after Nathan is Sarah Thatcher and Chris Tufts. Go ahead, Nathan.
Hi, my name is Nathan Cohen. I wanted to express my support for the plans. I was actually very, very impressed with how thorough the analysis was. I think it shows the amount of professionalism that the team is taking to look at these issues, and the expertise is really commendable. I feel sad that there are a lot of people who are engaging in fear-mongering, and I really hope that if you do have fears from other users, like, get outside and meet people, because I really have had almost exclusively good experiences with other trail users. I'm a hiker, I'm a mountain biker, and the fact is, the narrower the trail, the safer everyone is, because it slows down people. And as much as I like riding the fire roads as well, single track is safer in my opinion. And when people say it's hard to pass, well, you know, it's hard for two hikers to pass also. And so it's really just not a very practical way to look at it. Because when you're passing, you can stop and you can say hello, and you know, you can move on with your day and you know, have a positive experience. Go look at the backside of China Camp, extremely narrow trails, everyone's smiling, everyone's safe, and that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sarah Thatcher, please.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. My name's Sam. I'm just on my wife Sarah's account. Yeah, I'm mostly a trail runner and hiker. I do occasionally mountain bike. But I want to just lead this off with a quote, which I hope you all know where this is from, that fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering. So I hope that we can all use green and blue lightsabers instead of red lightsabers, and not be led by fear, but instead be led by robust data, which I hope that this pilot program can provide us with. We really don't know how mixed use single track will be until we try it out. And that's exactly what this is going to be. And I'm big time in favor of it. As a trail runner and hiker, I've lived in a ton of places across the US. I've never lived somewhere where bikes are banned from single track, and I've only lived in places where I, as a runner, have shared the single track with a lot of mountain bikers. And I got to tell you, it's awesome. I love sharing the trails. I really think that folks who don't mountain bike should be open-minded to sharing the trails with something that makes them a little bit uncomfortable, because things in life that make you uncomfortable, it can be really good to approach those things and learn about them and be led by a sense of curiosity over a sense of fear. I really want to echo Bill Engelhart, I think his name was, the idea that we need control trails to compare against the trails that we're testing in order to have that robust data and not mistake certain outcomes for being caused by certain things. I also would love the board to consider the possibility of seasonal trail closures, as Camp Tamarancho does when the trails are wet. They close to minimize damage and to minimize the amount of work that's needed to restore them. So that could be something cool to think about. Thank you so much.
Ups, please. And then Amanda.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Great. Hi, I want to thank the staff and the board, and I also want to thank the awesome individual who's marshaling all of these speakers. Hopefully almost wrapped up here now that we're into the Star Wars quotes, but I do love those. As a third generation Marin resident, I know several long tenured users are unwelcome to the prospect of change. It's hard, but I'm committed to positive, polite, actual bridge building with them. I hear a lot of complaints about the state of the trails in the pilot from their current users who have had access to those trails for decades and may not have been as committed to actually improving them. I hike, run, and I bring my children on these trails and have not felt unsafe, but I do see firsthand that they could be better maintained. And one user group in particular is showing up to asking to volunteer and actually improve them. Madrone is one of the trails that was mentioned and is very rutted up at the lower switchbacks. I know because I hike it, and I'll be there to fix it myself so I can share it. I can be slow, say hello to hikers, and teach my children to share it with other users as they ride their bikes and hike. So let's, to quote a prior speaker, I'll say, let's call a spade by picking up a spade. And I'll see everyone at the trail day to help improve our shared space. Thank you to the board particularly. It takes courage to explore change and not be captive to fear. And thank you for having the courage to explore this program and adding balance to trail access in a measured and methodical way. That's it.
Thank you. Amanda, then Janet Rose, please. Amanda?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to say I am really happy to be a part of this meeting tonight. And I'd like to support approval of this pilot plan. I was born and raised here in Marin. I grew up in Larkspur and I now live in Terra Linda. So I've been here for over 40 years, and my mom, who's in her 70s now, is the one that introduced me to mountain biking, which has been incredible for me. And I consider that a great fortune and not an entitlement. And I've heard a lot of entitlement tonight, and I would be happy to acknowledge it's on both sides, but I think that there's been a lot of really positive comments, and I'd like to lean into that and just reiterate that, you know, though I feel like there's a serious issue with the equity in trail use, I love seeing other trail users when I'm out riding my bike, hikers, equestrians, everybody, other mountain bikers. And I think it makes for a really fun and diverse experience. And so I really want to have that shared trail access. And, you know, I think that the prospect of having more of that opportunity to integrate is really exciting. And I really look forward to working on the trails with the other trail users. And I think I'd like to reiterate what Krista said, that I think Mount Tam could really use more champions. And I think that to ignore a huge trail user group is really not the best idea. So I think it's really important that we all have equal access to the trails and equal voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Janet Rose, please.
Yeah, it's actually Jamie Morgan. I'm using my partner's account. I'm a previous resident of Marin County, and I support the project. I'm a mountain biker. I ride a full suspension mountain bike with my handicapped partner who could not otherwise be accessing nature without that. I think we can learn a lot from what's happened in Santa Cruz. I'm a member and a volunteer trail leader of the Santa Cruz Trail Stewardship, and they do awesome things about, you know, encouraging shared use and also maintaining the trails. I think that mountain bikers are some of the most active, you know, community supporting the trail development, and it's a lot better. And clearly the trails have been neglected because there's a disenfranchised user group, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrell, please, and then Rowie Gilren.
Hi, my name is Terrell Culloway. I'm the executive director for Marin County Bicycle Coalition. We were called a special interest group tonight here, and I just wanted to clarify that like any other nonprofit organization, we are dependent on donations from our community. Our average size of donation is under $100, and we represent 11,000 people in Marin County. So yes, we are powerful, but that's because there are a lot of us. There are a lot of us who care about these trails. There are a lot of us who've been excluded from them for decades in the birthplace of mountain biking. It's a real shame. And I just really want to commend everybody here for keeping an open mind and for acting out of, you know, concern for the next generation rather than out of fear and kind of resistance to change. So thank you.
Thank you. Rowie Gilren, please.
Hi, I'm Tiffany, and I'm a mother of two. And one of the first lessons that I taught my children was about sharing. And I know it's been mentioned a few times around entitlement, but something that, you know, we teach is that one person isn't better than the other, and one person shouldn't have more access than the other. And I really believe that if we can teach our children to share and to coexist, we as adults can do it too. I'm actually a runner. And I've never had a negative encounter. I go out every day. I've never had a negative encounter on the trail with mountain bikers. My kids have been scared by horses before, but I've told them that's okay. They're allowed to be here too. And we just move aside and let them pass. It takes about, you know, a few seconds. And so I really believe that as a community, we can come together. I know a lot of time and energy and money has been spent on this resolution, and I hope we can move beyond this into other issues. And then, as many people have said, it's such a wonderful community. I love the high school students that came and spoke. My husband and my kids, 4 and 7 years old, have gone out and helped work on these trails. And it's a community that the mountain biking community spends a lot of time in making improvements. And, you know, many times it's the trails are, it's such a great day, but the whole mountain biking crew decides to stay home because it's wet out there and they don't want to damage the trails. So there's definitely a lot of respect and love, and I hope that we can pass this resolution and all enjoy it together.
Thank you. Ms. Pamela Meigs then, and then 1402.
Hi, this is Pam Meggs. Good evening. It's so nice to hear different members of the community. I am a retired registered nurse. I worked 40 years in the county. I am talking to you about safety and the horrible injuries that can come from electric bikes. I'm not saying all injuries come from them, but head injuries especially, which can be permanent. As a grandmother and being in my 70s, you keep bringing up fear, and I'm telling you, I've almost been run over a few times. I live in Fairfax, and I do have fear, especially when people come racing down the hill, and I don't know if I have enough time to get out of the way. Now, as far as single track, the hiking single tracks up here are all rutted so bad that you have to be careful, especially from the tree roots, that you don't fall. So my biggest concern is safety. As I learned in nursing school, safety always comes first. And I don't know if this plan really iterates that on a heavy way, that, that should be your first look and initiative. And when you look at when you go back to review what you're finding, especially like ER reports and how bad are the injuries? Are they minor? Are they major? I mean, is there death involved? So that's where I'm coming from. I'm undecided on this. I still think it could do some more work. And I don't know what else to say. My grandfather won gold medals in Australia for bicycling. And I really want this to work. I mean, it's about health, it's about community and pulling people together. But you'll still need to squeak out a few things more for me. Thank you.
Thank you. 1402, and then Mr. Bob Middlestead, I see you twice, so please, you're only allowed to speak one time. Mr. 1402?
James Holmes Larkspur, 2 points. First, I don't see how you can restrict use to Class 1 e-bikes. It's hard to tell the difference between the classes, and some bikes are mislabeled. Police and schools are having a hard time identifying classes in connection with trying to figure out what youngsters can legally ride. Given the difficulty of identifying e-bike classes, I predict that we will soon see Class 2 and 3 quasi-motorcycles whizzing along the trails, just as they are now whizzing along the streets, but with much worse results on the trails. And second, how much are we hard-pressed ratepayers paying for this pilot project? What is the cost of the multitude of tasks staff will need to do to implement this complicated project? Will the evaluation include cost-benefit considerations? And please include ratepayers who far outnumber all other user classes in the stakeholder meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bob Middlestead, and then Barbara Salzman.
Hi, this is Bob Middlestead. As many of you know, our group E-Bike Access is mostly senior citizens who have transitioned to pedal assist bicycles, and we consider ourselves to be stewards of the watershed as much as anybody else. After more than half of a decade of hard work, it's time to move forward under the leadership of this board. This board has already unanimously approved the 2 pilot projects in concept. I thought tonight was going to be about how to implement the pilots that have already been approved in concept. And I think the staff's proposal is thoughtful and comprehensive and should be approved. Seems to me it's time to stop making all the same arguments we've heard for 5 or 6 years and to start coming together to implement with goodwill all around these proposals. From the outset, the board was committed to a data-driven approach, and the survey provided hard data. Most of the surveyed people favored access for e-bikes. Only 1% felt unsafe. That's the public speaking. And I urge the board to stick to that data-driven approach rather than to rely on the anecdotes we've heard tonight and over the years, no matter how heartfelt those stories are. But the picture that have been painted tonight by some just doesn't square with what we see on the mountain every day. If it did, the survey would have come out a lot differently. On e-bikes, this is not close to a revolution. It's not much of a change, given that e-bikes, Class 1 e-mountain bikes, have been on the mountain for years, and they're officially approved on the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And the sky has not fallen there. And finally, it's easy to tell the difference between an e-mountain bike and an e-motorcycle. Just very easy to tell the difference. The Rangers know how. Thank you very much for your work.
Barbara Salzman and then Marilyn Price.
Hi, my name is Barbara Salzman. You hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah, my board meeting is over, so you're still going on. My board meeting started exactly the same time as your meeting. So here I am having an opportunity to speak. I submitted a complicated letter this afternoon. I hope you all have had a chance to read it because it had some critical points in it, we think, and hope you will be responding to it. I frankly don't see, I missed all of the what I expect happened. It reminds me of years ago, must have been 10 years ago, the same process went through with the pleads. We have nowhere else to ride. This is the only place in Marin County where one can ride a bike or one can have access. So you know, you need to look at history and look at really what you're responsible for, which is you're not a public access organization. You're an organization that needs to protect the watershed. And I'm afraid with if you approve this tonight with the minimum, if any, monitoring requirements and other restrictions, I'm afraid our watershed will continue to go downhill. So I hope that you will be responsible and continue this hearing until you're able to have a better plan to ensure the watershed is protected. And I'd like to take off my Audubon hat and put on my ratepayer hat. I agree with James Holmes. It's going to consume a lot of money that us ratepayers shouldn't be having to pay because we're paying for water, we're paying for maintaining the watershed, and that's not what this is doing. So thank you.
Thank you. And Miss Marilyn.
Oh, hi. Yeah, and I hadn't expected to speak tonight. Usually I join when we're trying to conserve our water, but I'm also a cyclist and have been bicycling all my life, mountain biking since the late 70s. And then I developed a mountain bike program for inner city kids also. And I've been listening to everybody, and I do see where both sides are coming from. And the person that most resonated with me was, and I'm not sure of her name, where she was a nurse who talked about safety. And what I would say, having been through this when you all were going to close the mountain entirely to mountain bikes way back. And we worked really hard to get them open, and I think it's been very successful on the fire roads. So just on these single track, I think just very careful attention. The argument that hit me the most as an 83-year-old person and with grandchildren is the safety issue. And that maybe you can, look at what other people are doing, how you can come up with ways, like they have speed bumps in the roads, the ways to get people to slow down. You're always going to have those renegade cyclists out there that aren't going to obey anything, but just really concentrate on the safety as you go through this. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, well, I think we have to thank all of our stakeholders, all of the public for the input. It's diverse. It doesn't always agree, but almost all of it has inputs that I hope we can consider as we go through this short 2-year pilot program. There's a lot that we're going to be learning. There's a lot that we can incorporate from the comments. It's for 2 years. And I think now is the time to move forward with that. So I will note that we have a couple of action items to approve here related to the pilot. Sean, you noted them. I'm going to repeat them again. The first is adoption pursuant to exemptions from the California Environmental Quality Act of Ordinance number 465, which updates the district code to allow for trial pilot programs that are approved by the Board of Directors by resolution. The second item is resolutions for an e-bike Class 1 trial and watershed trail sharing pilot program. So I'm hoping that we can cover both of these items with a single motion. And with that, I'll ask my board members, fellow board members, if we do have that motion.
Motion. Are we gonna have comments, Ranjiv, or are you skipping additional comments?
Jed, any additional comments would be great. Thank you.
I was riveted by the public's interest and input. I learned a lot, and I want to reflect a few of them right now. The first I wanted to say is that I feel privileged to have been able to work with this team at Marin Water to understand the depth of their analysis. And because of my access as a board member, I have the utmost trust in them and in their work that this has been thoughtful. And my focus on trust is more on building transparency and communication in as positive a way as possible with our community. And one way I hope we can measure success of this will be the view that from our community that we're doing better as stewards of this land coming out of this project than we were now. I wouldn't mind measuring that. The success I believe in this project is based on data collection and analysis, as has been said. And one thing that I learned from the public comments that I think we should consider is understanding the mixed use of these trail pilots. And Sean, I hope that you'll look at the comment of, 3-foot wide horses going up a trail or down a trail and mountain bikes that are 2 feet wide, and can they actually share a trail? Maybe we consider not having all of them share. And I think what that might require is something that you said we aren't doing, which is looking at the impact of different classes of use. And maybe we should look at the impact of horses as well, not just mountain bikes. As you mentioned, you're looking at the impact of horses on Sunnyside. So it sounds like we are doing some further look, but I think that there could be some thoughtful effort into maybe having just either single-use mountain bike or other. I'm not saying that is a requirement for my support. I am supportive, and I think that you said that this is your recommendation. So I am supportive of the Sunnyside being a weekday and not weekend. I think that was thoughtful. It will have less impact. And I did note that there was a very interesting comment from one of the public about seasonal trail closures. I haven't heard that from the staff. You may have that in there already, but I think that's a thoughtful thing to add. I do think a system-wide road and trail inventory effort would be something that would be an important byproduct of our historic investment in the watershed and our trail system. And lastly, I'd like to reiterate a quote that one of the public said that I think was spot on. And she said that I hope we can all work together and enjoy the outdoors safely and peacefully. And I think that kind of positive energy approach is wonderful.
Thank you, Jed. Anything else from board members? Okay.
Yeah, no, I would like to, I think Jed summarized some really good points, and so I won't reiterate them, but I agree wholeheartedly. I want to really shine a spotlight on the signage issue and make sure that before we launch this, that we really have got the signage appropriate so that when we launch, we're launching ready to receive people on the watershed looking to know where they can go, and I believe genuinely looking to know where they shouldn't go. So let's and that's kind of reiterating something I said earlier, but given the feedback that we heard from the public, I think that we've really gotten the message that the signage, maybe across the watershed, but for sure in the places where we're looking to increase access, that we want to get that really right. Seasonal closures, I do want to draw on that. I wonder whether if not seasonal, whether just even during rain events, or immediately thereafter rain events, could be something that we again are encouraging. I know we're not going to go out there on a rainy day just to make sure that people aren't riding. It probably isn't feasible. But if as part of our cultural go slow, say hello, other things that I think the bike community really does want to do it right. And I think some of the speakers who came, especially the young trail riders, I think those really are the people who we are working with as well, and I want to give them a chance to succeed. And so I think if we come up with some good practices that will help minimize any potential impacts to trails, considering rain closures or something like that, I think would be worthwhile. So other than that, that's it.
Terry, is Larry still online? Larry, any other additions?
Yeah, I'm still here. The one question I have is there a sunset on the pilot, a date?
Yeah, so the pilot would run for a 2-year period.
2 years, okay.
Starting
from
October.
To October, okay. Yeah, this is a very complicated situation. I share the concerns about safety and about the difficulties of sharing the trails. I am open to the idea of the bicycles, but it's a very tricky decision. I can say this, were this permanent, I would vote no. But as a pilot, it's difficult not to be just in a knee-jerk situation. I've faced this issue for 20 years, as I've said. It's a complex issue, and the technology has changed, which makes it more complicated. I've said this many times before, the only intelligent part of the bicycle is the rider. And the riders need to pay attention to what they're doing and to share their physical usage of these trails with everybody. That's one of the things that we're hearing over and over again. And I'm not sure we've achieved that here. As far as the signage goes, it seems to me that we should go to a standard European style sign, which are much bigger than 3 inches by 3 inches. But, and if we need to have an explanation that the circle with a line through it means no, then we need to write that out at the beginning and make sure everybody's aware of it.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Then I think we're ready to move on. Do we have a second for the motion?
Second.
Terry, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Smith,
Aye.
Vice President Sampson,
Yes.
and President Kush.
Aye. Okay, thank you, everybody. And most of all, thanks to Sean, Carl, Sherry, and Don and everyone that's worked with you. I think we can move on then, Terry, to our next agenda item, which is the review of future board and committee meetings.
Yeah, I only have internal meetings for this month. The next board meeting is Tuesday, September 17th. I believe it starts at 5:30 because of a closed session. But that could be to be determined. Thursday, September 19th is another watershed committee. And Friday, September 20th is our operations committee meeting. Thursday, September 26th is our finance and administration committee meeting. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Terry. And with that, I will adjourn the Marin Water Board of Directors meeting of September 3, 2024.
Thank you.